Good evening and welcome to the February 6th, 2025 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at accgov.com/planning. For those of you attending in person, on the table by the door, you will find a sign-in sheet and copies of tonight's agenda. For each agenda item, we will begin with a report from ACC planning staff. This will be followed by a presentation by the applicant, not to exceed 10 minutes. We will then hear from members of the public. 3 minutes are allowed for any member of the public who wishes to address the Planning Commission. When addressing the commission, please provide your name, address, and the nature of your interest in the project, and direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the applicants. The audience is instructed to refrain from applauding or jeering the speakers. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants or members of the public at the podium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the Planning Commission and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the 3-minute time limit. For all speakers, please pay attention to the timing device near the podium. The device will display a yellow warning light when you have 30 seconds left, and then a red light when your time is up. After the public comment period, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. After that, the applicant will take their seat in the audience. At that point, the public portion for the agenda item is closed and the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss the item. We will receive no additional public or applicant comments unless requested by a planning commissioner. Finally, please note that the microphones in this room are sensitive and that the meeting is being broadcast live. Please turn off or silence your cell phones. I have a quick announcement at the top before we get into the agenda regarding the final 2 items on the draft agenda that was previously circulated under new business. What was numbered item 4, 6535 Jefferson Road. That project has been tabled by the applicant and will not be heard tonight. So anyone who was here to comment on that, just be aware it's not on the agenda anymore. And then the final item under new business was a text amendment concerning short-term rentals. That has been rescheduled for our March meeting and will not be discussed tonight. So we'll begin with the general business section of our agenda. And item 1 is introduction of staff reports and all other documents submitted to the Planning Commission at this meeting into the official record. I have a motion. Motion from Kristen.
Second.
Second from Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, approval of the January 2nd, 2025 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So,
Motion from Sarah, second from Jen. All in favor?
Can I just say,
Oh, sorry, we have
there was a
discussion.
correction.
Thank you.
Yeah, it mentioned that I approved or I seconded the motions in the very beginning, but I wasn't there. So I don't know who did that.
Oh, okay. Yes, good. So it looks like under general business,
That's the only reference.
items 1 and 2, the identity of the person who seconded those 2 motions is incorrect. Do we know who actually seconded them, or can we leave that to?
You can correct it. We can go back to the record and correct it.
Okay, all right. So with that alteration, do we have a motion to?
yeah, move to approve with the corrections as noted today.
Okay,
Second.
okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right. And then item 3, May courts review and public comment. Is there any May courts announcement?
No May courts announcements to report.
Okay, is any member of the public by chance here to comment on May courts? Which is the multi-county transportation
Planning.
plan. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the old business section of our agenda. And item 1 is 1055 Hull Road, and we'll begin with the staff.
All right, good evening, planning commissioners and public. First case before us is 1055 Hull Road, zone 2024-11-2262. So the request here is a rezone from a split zone parcel that is currently commercial, rural, and mixed density residential. They're seeking to take that parcel fully to commercial general. Future land use on this also needs to be adjusted for this request. It currently is general business and mixed density residential. They would like to just take that fully to general business. So here's the parcel. We've got a little bit older aerial here. If you went out and visited this site, you would probably see the apartments going up behind here. We are just a little to the east of the Kroger out at the 72 and 29 intersection, up just north of Athens-Clarke. Just down the road from where the Voiles connection comes into Hull Road here, and a few other pieces. There's also some apartments that are going in to the west over in this block over here, the apartments to the north going back here. And so here is a look at the future land use. You can see the parcel there. It just has a partial sliver that is mixed density residential. Remainder of it is general business. They would like to take that fully to general business, aligning there with the other parcels that are along Hull Road. And then here is the zoning request. So they've got the RM to the rear, which is the brown, and then they've got the CR across the property, looking to change that fully to CG, which you can see adjacent there to the west and then across the street as well. Here's a shot looking into the property. There's the apartments going up to the rear. This parcel is just about an acre. So the depth there goes a little bit back behind. Those are some large telephone sort of transmission poles back there to the roof. So the development in this area has changed quite a bit since sewer was expanded out there. I'm sure everyone's seen the Kroger and the other developments around there. This request fits among the pattern that is going on. Part of the growth concept map and future land use mapping efforts that we're doing has this as a node, and that node extends a little bit to the east of here, approximately about a half a mile to where the edge of that would be. The other parcels along Hull Road are a mix of commercial employment. And then as you saw, there's a small amount of mixed density. Most of that is to the rear. It's mostly commercial and employment along the corridor there. So in terms of the future land use, staff is recommending approval to take that fully to general business. And in terms of the zoning request, staff is also recommending approval to take that to commercial gen. And with that, we'll conclude the staff report.
Next, we will hear from the applicant.
Good evening, I'm Brett Thurman. I'm an engineer at Armstrong McNeely Thurman in Athens, Georgia, 330 Research Drive. We're just trying to put an orphan parcel back together with the C parcel, or the CR parcel there. Again, we agree with staff recommendation and would wholeheartedly request that you approve it. I will say that there was one condition in the report that sewer need to be extended. That's already been completed. The sewer from the west extended under the private drive on that brown parcel that comes down and onto this parcel. So that work has already been done. It may not have been tested and approved yet, but it's in the ground. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Thurman. We'll open it up for public comment. Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in favor of this application? And is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in opposition to this application? All right, that concludes the public comment portion, and we'll be back behind the rail. We're going to start us off.
Start us with a motion.
Sure.
I'd like to move that we approve the future land use change request.
Second.
Motion by Sarah Beresford, second by Sarah Gearing. Approve the future land use request. Do you need a roll call, Bruce? Or- Okay. All in favor, or any discussion of the motion? All in favor? Say aye. All right, motion carries unanimously.
I'll make another motion that we approve the zoning, the rezone request.
And is that for clarity with the condition recommended by staff?
Yes.
Okay.
So approval with the conditions.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Sarah, second by Kristen to approve the rezone with the condition recommended by staff. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Unprecedented. Wait.
There's a lot on our.
Two under old business, 445, et cetera, Barnett Shoals Road, Drive. And we will begin with the staff report.
Hold on one second. We've got a new laptop today and Ollie and I are working on the fly. Thank you for your patience. Okay, Planning Commission, this is the Shoals development, part of the former Lakewood Plan Development. This is, I believe, the third time you guys have heard this. We tabled this the last time that it came back for the master review to get a few things cleared up. And so hopefully I can describe what was changed here. But we're looking at 445, 605, 705, 1015 Barnett Shoals, 190 to 210 Lakewood Drive, and 162 Park Ridge Court. This is PD 2024-07-13. Currently, it is Commercial Neighborhood Plan Development, RM1 and RS8. They're looking to take all of those parcels to the Commercial Neighborhood Plan Development. So they're looking to build out a large section of the unfinished portion of the plan development with a new neighborhood. In fact, a few pods of different neighborhoods. If you hear me say pods or groupings of neighborhoods, there's 4 throughout this project. There is a mix of single-family detached housing, townhomes, live-work units, mixed-use commercial residential, multifamily units, mostly on the smaller size in the about 20 to 30 unit range. They are looking for some flexibility in this plan, so they have a range of units they are looking for. So that's anywhere between 540 and 795. Those are broken down by the 4 different pods, and it kind of talks in there about percentages of what can go in those spaces and where maximums and minimums are for those throughout the, I believe it's referred to as the architectural design book from the applicant. They're also looking to include a minimum of 20,000 square feet of commercial. That is all to be programmed in the first phase, which is known as the arts and entertainment phase. There is some commercial allowance in the back phases, and there's more room for commercial in the front phase. And then there's also the availability of things like live work units. So that's kind of where we're starting at, hoping to see possibly a little bit more than that. The plan is semi-binding, and you'll see that throughout the report. One of the binding elements is the street network. So the way you see it there, other than some technical things that this body sort of discussed, it will be laid out in that fashion. It might twist just a tiny bit more or make room for emergency vehicles at corners and things like that, but essentially to be where it is laid out. They're looking to include 5 street connections. 3 of those would come out to Barnett Shoals. One would be the current connection to Deacle Drive, to part of the existing portion of the plan development that's been built out. And then the other one would be to connect to Park Ridge Court. You will see in here with a waiver request and with some of the design and a project you all saw before, they would like to make a connection through to the neighborhood that is back behind the Willow Mist neighborhood. That would be down the line. That would be part of the fourth phase of this and would also include working out connections with that development that you all saw, which I believe was 66 detached units over there behind Shady Brook. The principles behind this are mostly new urbanist in design. We've got a lot of alley-loaded garages, a lot of variety of housing types, mixing of the compatible commercial and residential uses, lots of public greens, some of which that the units face on as opposed to just facing onto a street. Street trees, buildings that are close to the street, and then a few other parameters that have been placed on the minimum building variety that will help out this neighborhood see that variety. Because as you guys know, this is a plan that has a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of unknown with the flexibility that they're requesting here. So the applicant is asking for 12 waivers. I apologize that that did not get changed. Staff does support all 12 of them. I got that on a final slide. My apologies on that first bullet. They're looking to substitute the design book for what we commonly call the Section 925 design standards. Those are the standards that a typical neighborhood or new commercial project or multifamily project that just comes in to do by right work would have to follow. A little bit of data about where this has been. Started in 04, some amendments along the way in 05, 6, 14, 17, and 20. And then as you can see down there, it's changed in intensity and scope over time. So originally quite a bit more commercial was planned, quite a few condominiums and apartments, and then some single family detached. A lot of that, or excuse me, a portion of that has been built out. Most of that are the single family to the rear of the lake, and then the apartments that come in off of Barnett Shoals. I believe the name of that road is Cotton Creek, where those come in. And then there's also some townhouses that are throughout there with some ADUs on them. Again, the proposal here is flexible, so there's a lot of unspecified amounts of whether there be condominiums, apartments, and single family detached, but they do have the opportunity for all of those products throughout the neighborhood, again, with some percentages that they would need to hit along the way on a pod by pod basis. So here we are on Barnett Shoals. You can see a lot of the existing single family is up in this portion of the neighborhood, been in for quite a few years. The apartments and the townhomes were built here behind the assisted living facility that you can see on Barnett Shoals as you go down the road. As you go through here, I'm sure not everyone is aware that there's a very nice lake back here. This is just, you know, wooded, undeveloped on the right-hand side as you drive down Barnett Shoals towards Lexington. And then we've got quite a bit of multifamily there across the street that's also sort of tucked back a little bit. So most of the connections would be coming in off of here to Barnett Shoals. This is the arts and entertainment pod. And then as you get back into here, there's a neighborhood pod planned in here, a smaller one here, and then a final pod back here. This is the connection to Park Ridge Court right here. So that's the one small property there. And then the property back behind Willow Mist and Shady Brook, that connection, if we get all the way there, the final phase would be through this spot right where the arrow is. So here's a look at the future land use, predominantly the same throughout this. The small changes were this tiny little parcel up here that has actually kind of come off the plans. They were originally trying to do some stormwater work there. I don't believe that's a part of it anymore. And then the tiny little parcel on Park Ridge Court as well. Otherwise, pretty much the same throughout. And then similar here with the zoning. So we've got a tiny little zone change and tiny little zone change on that little nub right there. So here's some shots looking down Deacle Drive, driving in there. You can see the layout. They're trying to keep this similar street section. So they've got the street trees and the verge between the roadway and the sidewalk. They're looking to continue that throughout the development. And then here, this is a look at some of the single family. You can see the houses pulled up towards the streets. You can see some street trees again, some landscaping in front and those types of elements. So here is the overall site plan. And then I'll dig in a little bit further. Mind you, the street network and a few other elements are binding. We'll go over those, but many of these aspects are flexible. So what you see here, you see sort of a townhome arrangement here, and you see what's a little bit more of a commercial style and maybe a cottage bungalow court style. That's all asked by the applicant to be flexed quite a bit. I will say they're looking to do a Main Street entrance right here that will be private. That would be one of the few private areas of the road network so that they have the ability to shut that down for events. The other portion is when they're coming over top of the dam in this area right here. They need a little bit of flexibility so they can make sure their engineering standards work out. Otherwise, they're looking to follow all of the pathway, sidewalk, street tree requirements that we have throughout the entire development. Here's a shot looking towards the rear. Again, you can see things like homes fronting on a green in the middle here. You see some alley loaded homes pulled up to the street. You see some pockets of homes. You can see some variety in the sizes. And then again, similar here through the back two pods of this neighborhood. This is all in the packet that's been sent out and the materials available online, so I don't expect to go through this whole thing. I just kind of wanted to show you how they're going to be looking at some of these. So they've got the 4 pods here. They've got their types of character and neighborhoods up here, and you can kind of see how they're planning for primary and secondary options throughout those pods. And then again, with their housing just structure types here and how those are going to fit into those character areas throughout. So there's going to be a lot of how does this fit there, sort of looking through this matrix as this project does get developed and administered and looked at. And then again, by their ornamental elements and elements of their building structure, it discusses in there a kit of parts approach. So they have to follow a few different things about entryways and cladding and openings such as doors and windows. And then they need to meet a few other of these. So that's how we would end up having to administer this if this moves forward. And you can see how those opportunities would work throughout the different districts there. This is one of the early phases showing 2 of the types, so the Southern vernacular, and then you can see here it talks about style of openings, style of cladding, roof form, those types of elements, and then example design elements down here. Here is an example of the mixed use opportunity. You can kind of tell some of these ones in gray are things that they are required to do. Some of these other ones are the options that they then get to choose from in that matrix I showed just 2 or 3 slides ago, to hopefully perform and construct a building that looks something like this. Another example here, this is the mansion apartment, I believe. So similar how they're going to have to look at it. And then, final form looking something similar to this. So the things they are looking to bind in this plan are that architectural design book with all of those matrices, with all of those requirements in there, with all of those options in there for the designs by unit type and by design type. There is a range of dwelling units in each of those pods. If you look through those sections, in that there's a chart in there about what can be in there and what sort of minimum percentages are in there. The 20,000 square feet of commercial they're looking to commit to. The framing of the open spaces so that the open space that is required on a per pod basis doesn't just get pushed to the side, it gets used and becomes an amenity for each of those communities. They are committing to primary entrances fronting on roadways or green space. They are committing to that street network, the greenway path, the road sections, and the alignment. Also, the CN zoning uses, they have added just a few extras there on page 23. And they've even put a few parameters on some of those so they don't get out of scale with the community. And then they've also put in a few exceptions, mostly automotive ones like drive-throughs, vehicle repair uses, and then additionally cemeteries and mortuaries. Lastly, front yard parking would not be permitted throughout the project. So again, some of the binding elements in here on more of a technical basis, the way we would say this in our code. So we've got regulations that look like this in our code. And the applicant is proposing some of these aspects so we can see that. Another way we can look at what they are going to be bound to and how the development will occur. So in terms of staff recommendation, very good opportunity here for diverse housing types. Lots of opportunities. I think they've got about 20 different housing types throughout this project that are possible. Focused around green spaces as social centerpieces. Very walkable, connected, sort of traditional neighborhood, new urbanist design elements there throughout the proposal. It's compatible with the future land use map and the zoning map. Does have a potential for future neighborhood development to be mirrored off of what we're seeing here. And really appreciate the back and forth that staff has had with the applicant to balance the needs that it takes for us to administer some of these plans and the benefits to the community, while still allowing some of that flexibility to the applicant. So it's been a great process. Hope we kind of hit the mark on that. Again, the 12 waivers as laid out in the staff report are about allowing the semi-binding plan, allowing duplexes in commercial neighborhood, allowing ground floor residential throughout. This is all going to be commercial zoned where we typically require ground floor commercial. There's a flexing on the minimum lot size, an allowance for accessory dwelling units, an allowance to flex those block standards. It's a little bit unique and flexible. So they're asking for that, but they're trying to utilize the road network and the structure around the green spaces to show how they would like to do it. Swapping the architectural design book for those design standards. There's a reduction on the sidewalk across the dam, so it only goes to one side of the street so they can fit. The cul-de-sac dead end turnaround is about that connection to the Shady Brook Willow Mist neighborhood when they get to that final phase. Until that's there, they need to put in something that Transportation and Public Works otherwise would not permit. The connection to the residential street on Park Ridge Court is a required waiver. They're also looking to change the parking minimums. They have some information in there about how they will address parking throughout for the residences and any of the commercial, and then also areas where there's not direct parking, they've got a requirement to be within, I believe it's a quarter mile or approximately a 5-minute walk. And then lastly, allowing attached dwelling units within 100 feet of a property line. They have also put forward some conditions and staff supports these as well. So again, the semi-binding plan, there's a glazing requirement on the main street there, the commercial amount, the minimum lot size. They would like to work with ACC Transit when the time comes to see what kind of amenities the transit department would like, whether that's in through this development or just along Barnett Shoals. They are looking to comply with the technical requirements as stated in the staff report. The right-of-way or parking access is what I mentioned to meet any of those areas where someone doesn't have direct access onto a right-of-way. And that's really a lot about life safety, but also the things we see these days with delivery options, whether that's dropping children off after a practice or that's getting, the box from whoever you've ordered from online to get options there. The focusing on the centralized green spaces so they're not pushed to the side. The guest parking within a quarter of a mile. They are committing to the boundary. So the other parts of this plan development are not shifting, just the sections we have shown to you. They are looking to do some enhancement on the entryways to each of the structures. And then we have the CN additional allowances and prohibitions. So lastly, staff has just a few conditions. So we support all of those proffered conditions. Just wanted to lay that out here instead of making 13 new conditions on here. Staff is asking that the technical aspects of the staff report be adhered to, which the applicant has agreed to. Tend to not point this out, but this being semi-binding, we've just pointed it out in this case. And then there's some access easements that will be needed throughout this process. So as they are going forth, that those are obtained. Staff does have one other condition that I think we should talk a little bit about, and I think the applicant will mention. Staff wants to make sure that the community benefit of this topography and design that we see throughout here is maintained and not turned into something that is requiring massive retaining walls. So we have lifted some of the retaining wall language from chapter 9-10 of our code. It has some height restrictions. If you go to a certain height, then you have to step it in a terrace style. And so I will allow the applicant to speak to that. I know they've got a few questions and would like to have some considerations made on that one. So that's the one condition I think that we just didn't fully get worked out between staff and the applicant. So we have left that on there for you all. Lastly, staff is very thankful for the work, the back and forth here. Just wants to outline that the technical aspects be met. We would really like to find ways to just preserve that rolling topography and create that natural layout. I'm certain the applicant would like to do that as well, but the realities of engineering require some different things from time to time. So we'd like to have that conversation and that those portions that are landlocked get those access easements. So with that, staff would like to recommend approval with conditions, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. At this time, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Scott Haynes. I work for W&A Engineering, 355 Edith Street. It's nice to be back before y'all this evening. I know that the last time we were here, we had a very lengthy discussion. And in the time since then, as Mark said, we have worked extensively to try to address all those concerns in the staff report from prior. And I think we've done a good job to get there. It was a lot of work. It's a big document. I understand it's a heavy lift. It's a lot of pages. So it's understandable that it could take this much time to try and sort through that. And I appreciate staff's willingness to continue to work with us to do those things. If I could.
Working on it.
I have a very brief presentation just to talk about, majority of which is going to be discussing this.
Oh, it's not coming up.
That works, Scott? You got the clicker?
Okay. All right, so again, as Mark mentioned, there is one condition here which we would like to have a little bit of discussion, that is around the retaining walls. Condition that staff has recommended for us. For you, what I've handed out is essentially some modified language for that condition. I think it was number 4 in the report. And there's one more too, but I'll pause on talking about the second one as we talk about this retaining wall in just a moment. Essentially, this is the language changes that you see before you. They're highlighted. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of a breakdown of what those entail. It's three main things. First, I want to clarify that we'd like this condition to only apply to walls that rise above the right of way. Right. So walls that are supporting the road, holding up the road that you would not necessarily see, we'd like for those to be exempt from this. Reason being is that those walls, in many cases, are going to be bordering environmental areas. So additional setbacks, additional terracing, for things that you're not really going to be visible to, would just impact environmental areas. So we really like this to just focus on the walls that will rise above the right of way. Okay. Secondly, we're asking that the setback ratio be changed. Staff has asked for a 2 foot for every 1 foot of height after the wall reaches 3 feet of height. What we're asking for is that we just do a 1-for-1 setback from the ground up. I put a matrix up here, kind of shows you what that would mean. At a 10-foot wall, it's 4 feet less of a setback. At a 12-foot wall, it's 6 feet less than a setback. This is important. When I get to you, I'll show you a slide that shows where these walls are actually being affected on site. But for the most part, it's very minor change to that, but it is impactful, especially in the commercial area, as I'll get to in a minute. And then last, we're asking that the 10-foot height max be increased to 12 feet. Now here on this slide, you can see where our walls are that actually do rise above the right of way. They're primarily along Barnett Shoals. And we have, they vary in height. So in the center area where the main street is, it's nearly a grade. Barnett Shoals sort of rises right at that point. Comes up to that if you're heading from north to south, it sort of rises to where it's Main Street and then it falls away again. So the walls that are on this near the southern entrance here and a little bit here would be tall compared to the Main Street entrance, which would be nearly nothing. There are some areas in there where those walls will need to be 10 to 12 feet tall. And if we impose the standards for setback staff has asked for, they're going to push those walls into the commercial area. They're going to impact what we believe is desired commercial space. They also potentially affect our ability to have aerial apparatus protection there because it pushes those buildings too far away from the edge of pavement on Barnett Shoals. And so for those reasons, we believe we can work within these modified language standards on there. Walls be no taller than 12 feet. And that would not be for the entire length of Barnett Shoals, but only in those limited areas. And that the setbacks would allow us to keep the buildings essentially this configuration that we've shown you. Okay, so we're asking for those minor considerations in language change, and we've spelled those out here so that you could potentially adopt that as part of the motion for approval if you so choose to do it. Going back up, I would want to offer that we have proper one other additional condition, and that is that we would like to bind this to have 3 EV charging stations for electric vehicles in the commercial area, and the same for 120 volt outlets for charging bicycles in the commercial parking area as well. This is just to look in advance to what we know is sort of what's on the horizon and some things that we've heard at the commission level that we feel we want to address now here and get those into this application so it's very clean when they get a chance to see it. These are really the only changes we're asking for. We appreciate everything else that staff has done to help work through these things with us. And with that said, I'd really like to just turn this over to y'all for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. At this time, we'll open it up to the public. Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in support of this application? Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in opposition to this application? All right, seeing none, we will bring it back behind the rail. Sarah.
I wanted to bring the applicant back up for a question. I'm sure the first of many that you'll have. So what I'm curious about, as I'm thinking about this, and something that I would just like to have out there for consideration at this body and beyond. I'm curious because we talk about rezone approvals and PD approvals, and we talk about them as if we are the county, the government is giving permission to build anything here, right? We talk about it as, do you want housing? Do you want more housing? Do you want more commercial, or do you not want anything? And I think that conversation generally can be misleading because every single parcel of land that we look at generally it can already have things built on it. The question is usually not really, should we build anything here or not, but should we build this here as opposed to what can currently is allowed by right? So my question for you, and if you don't have anything to say about this at all, I completely understand. Can you tell me anything about the PD that's currently in place? I know we got some numbers. We got some numbers for different housing types, and we got some numbers for commercial space. Can you like describe to me, just like narratively, I don't need a bunch more numbers. Like how is this different from what could already be built by right here?
Broadly, there's a lot of commercial in the original PD. I think the number was around 160,000 square feet.
Yeah. Do you know like what the nature of that commercial? Would that be like a big box store commercial? Is the nature of this commercial different other than what you can see by the numbers?
I think it has a different character to it for sure. It was the footprints were as refined in the original PD. There was a design book in that PD that talked about things. But generally speaking, it was sort of the volume of commercial. And then as you move further back into the project, it became more just single family, more larger lots to be handled, I think, really as pods of single family. So I think what we're trying to show here is something that feels more in scale of what we think is the need for commercial. Obviously, over the last 20 years, the larger commercial plan has not come to fruition. Market has a lot to say about that. So
it makes me think of like the big empty commercial spaces and a lot of the like big apartment buildings and other PDs. That's all for my question, and I will yield the floor, especially if other people have questions for the applicant, so he's not up and down all night.
I could speak, but I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I think it's been really interesting seeing this project come before us and get to know what's going on here. As someone who didn't, honestly, I wasn't even really aware of what was currently on this property until like several months ago when we saw this for the first time. And ironically, I had some other things that took me back there as well. So I've really been discovering this piece of property and this whole area as a neighborhood. And I think it's a really interesting, it's just been really interesting watching a landowner go to such extent to create a community and take the time to work with staff to create this unique situation of like sort of a semi-organic development getting created over time, and knowing we might not be around to see all of it, but maybe we can create something that can then be passed on to the next generation. I don't know, I think it's been really interesting, and I know the last time that we saw this, my main concern was leaving something for staff to feel confident that they could execute, like they weren't having to wield too much power, and there was some give and take, and they felt like they had a say in what was going on. So, yeah, I guess, and I think it's really interesting that the applicant has brought forth the EV chargers. I was literally driving here tonight thinking, do we not have a requirement for new apartment buildings to have EV chargers? So, I think it's really timely. And I also don't necessarily, I'll say retaining walls are one of my weak points where I have a really hard time visualizing what that looks like. But I also know there's so many different variables at play with this development. I would hate to have some kind of thing throw off the calculations of that one pod or node, and it changes the whole development and everything kind of has to get redone. So I do recognize the topography is difficult along that road. So I understand this request. So that's where I'm at.
I would just add that I would be in favor of supporting the applicant's request, if anything, just to keep the commercial element intact, because it seems like the commercial element of this development is one of the things that adds it being a community and not just a neighborhood. And I think that that's something that I'd like to see in as many large developments as we have come before us. So anything that we can do to help retain the commercial space that's left, I think would be important. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of this design.
And can I ask a clarification? Is your comment directed to the applicant's version of the retaining wall?
Correct. Yes, what the
Condition.
applicant just had
Understood.
clarified.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Alex?
Actually would like the applicant to come back up. Sorry to do that to you, but, and I need to clarify something. The retaining walls on Barnett Shoals, I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying. What do y'all want to do differently there that is not in the staff report already?
We want to be allowed to make them as tall as 12 feet instead of 10. And we want to effectively decrease the setback when a wall is that tall. A wall that would be allowed to be 12 feet, if in staff's condition, that wouldn't be the case. It'd be only 10, limit of 10. I think the difference there is 4 feet between their setback and ours. We don't want it to set back as far as staff is asking us. So we're just simplifying and saying for every foot of height, there's a foot of setback from the right of way.
Mm-hmm. So that's and Bruce jump into. So we may be looking at the setback will just be back and up as opposed to.
The foot of the wall could not occur within that setback. So the wall cannot start until it clears that setback. For the 12-foot wall, if you, under our condition language, it would have to be 12 feet back from the right of way. The start of the wall would be 12 feet back.
Right. And that's what you want.
That's what we're asking for.
Yeah, and here, the staff is suggesting what?
Well, we were.
I'm trying to understand the difference.
Said, and I want to be clear, this isn't something staff just kind of cooked up or created.
Right.
We lifted the language that we currently have in the code as it relates to downtown and felt it was appropriate. So we just kind of lifted from that section of code, but that section of code has got noted as different. There is a 2-to-1 ratio as opposed to a 1-to-1 ratio, the setback. 10 feet is the max with that section. And there was some logic behind that. I don't, it doesn't necessarily have to apply universally, but that 10-foot height, the justification for it in downtown was that's about pedestrian scale. So if you're walking next to one of those walls, you get much above 10. Even 10 is somewhat imposing, but if it is setting back from the sidewalk or the property line, you've softened that, and there is a landscaping requirement that goes along with this as well that's important to keep in mind. You're not asking this, but I think from a staff standpoint, the change of the applicant's condition, the change wording here, thank you, bring that one up. Where from a staff standpoint, I think the 1-to-1 versus 2-to-1 ratio, we could probably work through that, especially with the landscaping requirements still in place there. I'm interested to hear y'all's discussion about the difference between 10 feet and 12 feet. One of the things that brought this condition to mind and staff recommended in the first place wasn't so much the walls that you see from the road. It's the walls that would appear behind somebody's house, where we might have a pretty dramatic drop behind somebody's backyard. And so we had a couple different reasons for having this condition. It wasn't just aesthetic. It wasn't just to create a more pleasurable experience along the roadway. It was also with a mind towards safety and livability, the long haul in these more private areas of the development behind the housing. So one of the things that I think has come out with this is that no portion of any retaining wall adjacent to and rising above the public right-of-way shall exceed 10, 12. Our language wasn't hinging on the public right-of-way. What we were leaning towards was no portion of any retaining wall shall exceed any retaining wall, regardless of where it is. And I think I just wanted that to be clear, that was part of the motivation. It wasn't just the visibility from the right-of-way.
Thank you, Bruce. I do have some questions about that. So if I understood you correctly, Mr. Haynes, although you're proposing a 1-to-1 ratio of setback to retaining wall height rather than 2-to-1, you would start it at the right of way rather than 3 feet back. So is that right? So you and staff would have a greater setback for you could currently do a 3-foot retaining wall with no setback. And under your condition, that would have to set back 3 feet. Did I understand you right?
That's correct.
Okay. And under staff, so the applicant's proposed condition would require a setback for every retaining wall that's above the right of way, rather than only those that exceed 3 feet. And I was going to ask a question that I think Bruce really spotlighted it well about. It's not just retaining walls that are up above a right of way, but retaining walls. I hear your point about something below the road maybe should be treated differently if it's like near the dam or otherwise protecting an environmental area, but people aren't seeing it out their back door or from the road or from a pedestrian or bicycle path. But to Bruce's point, not just ones that are above the road, but ones that are behind somebody's apartment or alongside a multi-use path that goes through the development or a sidewalk that's not on the right of way. I wouldn't want to see, unrestricted retaining. So is there any reason that we couldn't tweak the conditions to, for instance, use staff's condition, except as to just certain specified locations, like along Barnett Shoals Road, like you showed on your drawing, and then use your condition for that? And that might get a little messy, but I'm just trying to think of how we can avoid having a 20-foot retaining wall behind an apartment building.
What I would say to that is if we're approaching this condition as protecting what you see as public view, right? There's a retaining wall behind someone's house. That person's purchasing into that condition and they're accepting it. It doesn't mean we want necessarily that we want to put large retaining walls behind people's houses, but this property, as mentioned extensively, is very difficult topographically. The challenge to get sewer from the back of the property to the front of the property is a driving set standard that I have to abide by. It can only fall so far, and I have to get it to gravity drain all the way to front and back. And every time that we talk about putting these restrictions in on the edges now, that is going to affect our ability to engineer that. And I can't stress this enough. It's very difficult to work on the site. It's one of the reasons why it hasn't been developed at this point. I'd like us to keep the conversation to protecting the view from the right of way and not from someone's backyard who is buying a condition into that condition and choosing to live there. Whereas someone passing through the neighborhood has their view impacted by a large retaining wall. And again, we don't want to use large retaining walls because they're very expensive. It's not something we were trying to achieve. But I do caution Spotty on trying to put these restrictions in and engineering them from essentially from this podium, because they're going to have unintended consequences that will likely lead us back to this podium asking for more modifications to this plan because it simply won't work. So I'm pleading with you to please be mindful of that and sensitive to those challenges for us.
All right, I did have a couple other questions for you. Mark's slides, the staff slides showed that several prohibited uses, ones that are normally in the CN zone. And those are 2 out of 3 are identical with what's in your report, but staff slide said gas stations, vehicle repair and cemeteries. And your report on page 23 and 31 says gasoline sales, vehicle repair and cemeteries. Is that, which is right? And do you mean to allow for drive? I see in your report, gasoline sales is prohibited, but not drive.
It's our intention to prohibit drive-throughs and also to allow for what would be a convenience store, but not gas sales from that. So there could be a small shop, something that sold refreshments or things like that, consider convenience, but making sure that it could also sell gasoline. We're trying to do what we can to be get away from auto-centric type uses.
Right. So the development standards in here are what's binding. Would you have any objection to adding to the prohibited uses on page 23 and on page 31 a reference to drive-through?
We do not, and if it's not already in there, then that is an admission that was definitely not our intent. I think it's something that we had in the original report and somehow has come out, but we were not looking for drive-through uses.
What page was that on?
23 and 31. I guess 30 and 31 list the offered conditions list, so that would probably be the place that we would need to specify that it's added, and it's condition 13 on the applicant's proffered conditions. Add drive.
Back to this condition number 3. Should I infer from the proposed changes that you've made that you anticipate the need of a retaining wall higher than 12 feet in height somewhere that is not adjacent to the public right of way?
There will definitely be some fill walls that will exceed 12 feet in height that are against environmental areas.
Okay.
And potentially some on the edges of the property where we're trying to meet other grades, say on the very far edges.
Okay. Do you have any sense of like what's the maximum? Like what are the higher limits of retaining walls that you've looked at?
For walls above the right of way, for walls that are
Not near.
above grade and not below grade.
Yeah.
We did not study that intensively on the edges. I really don't anticipate them to be much outside of this, if at all. It's not something we studied, but because we were focused on right of way walls.
That makes sense.
Don't have any massive cut banks against these properties. There is a little bit of grade that we have to make up though.
Related to that, the condition, both the staff condition and your draft of the retaining wall condition. The second sentence says, no portion of any retaining wall shall exceed a given number of feet in height. Do I understand that correctly to mean even with staff's condition, you could do a 20-foot retaining wall? It's just you'd have to have a 5-foot step back halfway up. You could go 10 and then jump back 5 and then you could go 10 and more on staff's version. And under your version, you could do a 24-foot retaining wall just with a jog in the middle.
I mean, did he state that correctly on the definition of your?
For ours, because it's not indexed against the right of way. If it were to, if it were to go to 12 feet, we would be saying no portion of any retaining wall would exceed 12 feet. No moment in that wall would be higher from its top to the grade of 12 feet, whether it's backfilled or not.
But you could build a 12-foot or 10-foot wall and then move back
Yes,
5 feet and have another 10-foot wall. So
Correct.
If possible, we could see something. Here's what I'm thinking about. If you go by Nucci Space and then you cross the street and you walk up Wilkerson, you look at that horrific 36 or 50 foot, I don't know how tall it is, retaining wall below the mark, right? And that was allowed to happen because our zoning code didn't prohibit it. I think that's why the language of staff's condition got put into the zoning code so that we don't see that again. And so do you anticipate, that's why I want to know, like, to what extent you anticipate retaining walls that in gross, whether sectioned or not, exceed 10 or 12 feet?
Where we're asking for it on Barnett Shoals and anywhere else above the right of way adjacent to it, we're not expecting the wall to exceed 12 feet, even in a terraced situation. So we're not asking for 12, then a step back 5 and have another 12. We're expecting 12 to be the max. And the reason we can't conform with saying 10 and then step back 5 and then another 2 is that effectively adds another 5 feet to this, to an already 14-foot setback at that point. So it's making it 19, 20 feet. So by allowing it to just be 12 feet with the setbacks we have, it fits what the plan is drawn.
Okay, good, thank you. One question about your second new proposed condition on the handout we got about the EV charging stations. It says 3 EV charging stations within the commercial parking area. How many commercial parking area spaces are there in total? Is this 3 out of 100 or 3 out of 500 or?
I don't have the exact count, but it's those areas that are just adjacent to essentially Main Street behind that, both north and south. So, I mean, we can look at the plan, you can get sort of this parking lot and this parking lot.
Okay, and there would not be EV charging stations under your proposal anywhere else in the, like near apartments for somebody who does not own a home but wants to drive an electric car? That's
Correct.
That's not, they would not have.
We
We
currently,
don't require that currently, right, Bruce? There's nothing in the code that requires apartments to have EV. Okay.
Do I understand it and remember the topography of this correctly, that anything from the right of way, it goes down, right?
and
Like from Barnett Shoals and,
so from Barnett Shoals, this rises up,
okay.
which is why this wall here is above that right of way.
Mhm.
This rises up, this falls away. All of this falls away to these environmental areas.
Okay, and so in the areas where it's falling away, is there really a risk of retaining walls that go up into, like, over someone's house? Yeah, so it's like,
Now, let me clarify, there could be some conditions here where we join this property and here where we join this property where there might be a need for a raised retaining wall as those properties meet, because it's very close to that property.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I think that the applicant's proffered condition here is a reasonable departure from staff's recommendation, which I can see the logic from which staff came, and I can see the specificity with which the applicant has gone in and made some alterations. That in such a way that in addition to kind of understanding the topography there better, seems reasonable. It seems like it's not gonna impact that many houses, and I also agree with what the applicant said. This is a new neighborhood. People are buying into this condition, and it's not a health hazard. It's not the worst thing in the world to be able to see a wall, in my opinion. So I think that it's the proper conditions make sense.
Alex, as I remember from our last meeting with this applicant, the retaining walls didn't bother me as much because they're very expensive and no developer wants to do them. They don't sell property. They keep land from falling on property. And so I was pretty comfortable giving them some leeway that they had, but Sarah brought up something very smart that we need to, or they may need to sew this up so that the mayor and commission can understand it, because they have so many things coming at them at their meetings, and then they have to all of a sudden be planning commissioner in a sense. So I flipped from not wanting to table it to tabling it to give the amount of time to sew it neatly so that the mayor and commission could understand it. They vote the way they want to, but they need to know what they're voting on. So I'm feeling more comfortable with that, but I'm asking you, Sarah, do you feel that's been accomplished as well?
Yeah, it's a complicated project, and so I think that staff and the applicant have done a really great job of getting, it was pretty messy last time we saw it because there were so many recommendations, and you could tell that the applicant was willing to work with staff, but it just needed to be a little bit tidier of a package. But I don't know if you're done speaking.
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot either, but
I just wanted to say that I'm pretty comfortable with this. I think that this, with the retaining wall, the modified retaining wall language, I think this site is a civil engineer's dream or nightmare, and anything we can do that protects those environmental areas, and it's just a compromise. I see this as a compromise. I remember we had big conversations about retaining walls several years ago. We were talking about the downtown housing developments, and I understand the spirit of those regulations, but I think this is a pretty good compromise. Just generally, I think I'd love to make, I would love to see this go through. Feel like we've really analyzed it, and I'm excited to sort of get out of the way of this, and hopefully, I think that the hurdles ahead of the development group are huge. And I hope that our mayor and commission understand that. I think it's really important that they understand that these different housing typologies create a variety of price. And you have ownership opportunities, rental. Small houses are generally more affordable than larger houses. And I think that that's kind of a hot button issue on our commission right now, is don't like seeing housing coming through that doesn't seem like it's housing that people can afford. But I think that enough of a variety that we as a community should feel really good about, that this is adding housing stock that we need. So I'm a fan.
Kristen and then Sarah.
I'd like to make a motion for approval with staff conditions. So in the report, I'm going to refer to the report with staff conditions 1, 2, and 4, and applicants' additional conditions as provided in the supplemental paper that was handed out.
We have to read this into the record, aren't we?
Yeah, and future land use. Future land use would be the first motion.
Oh, okay, then
Prior.
scratch everything that I just said. And I would like to move for approval for the future land use change.
Second.
All right. Roll call.
Motion to approve future land use requests, Morales,
Yes.
Lease,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Laughlin,
Yes.
Pax. Yes. Sam's,
yes.
Sanders.
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, before we do another motion, I think Spira had more discussion of the.
No, I just, I wanted to make the motion. I think I can get through it pretty quickly. And just the smallest bit of discussion, which is that I hope that the mayor and commission take time to look through all of these materials. I know it's a lot, but I have a feeling that there will be a lot of questions asked that can be answered just by looking at this. In addition to what Sarah Beresford said about the mix of housing types, one thing that I wanted to specifically point out was the difference of commercial types. I look at these plans and I see small businesses. I see the ability for local people to come into this neighborhood in a way that we don't often see in these kinds of developments. So I think it's great. With that, I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of this applicant with staff conditions 1, 2, and 4, and with another condition, which is going to be the proffered condition of the applicant, which I will read. And then I will continue by reading some of the language from staff. Because in their third condition, there was language that was not about the right of way, which. Oh, it is. Oh, it's good. We got it. Okay. So I'll just read it. So conditions 1, 2, and 4, and this additional condition. Retaining walls that are adjacent to and rise above the public right of way shall be set back from the public right of way a minimum of 1 foot for every 1 foot of wall height as measured parallel to the right of way and accounting for any linear changes in height. No portion of any retaining wall adjacent to and rising above the public right of way shall exceed 12 feet in height. Terrace is required between a lower retaining wall and an upper wall, and the terrace area shall have a minimum 5 foot depth as measured from the upper grade of the lower retaining wall to the base of the upper retaining wall. Retaining walls over 5 feet in height shall be screened by a landscape buffer no shorter than 3 feet at the time of planting and reaching a minimum mature height of 6 feet. However, wall art, including murals, sculptural, or other decorative treatment of exterior walls, may extend for a maximum of 50% of the wall length. Acceptable exterior finishes materials include, but are not limited to, stucco, split-faced blocks, brick, stone, curved interlock blocks, wood, tubular steel, wrought iron bars, or other grille work, textural or scored poured concrete, engineered, green, or vegetative wall, as approved by the planning director, or a combination of these materials. Exposed flat-faced CMU blocks and EIFS stucco are prohibited.
Charger.
And the additional condition, the development shall implement a minimum of 3 EV charging stations for electric vehicles and 3 public 120 volt outlets for charging electric bikes within the commercial parking area of the development.
A second.
And just to clarify the motion, in conversation with the applicant, we earlier talked about adding the word drive-through to the prohibited uses in the applicant's proffered condition number 13. Is that change included
Yes.
in your motion?
Yes, and an additional condition, if Sarah's amenable to this friendly amendment, that the drive-through uses will be added to the prohibited uses outlined on page 31 of the applicant's book.
And page 23.
And page 23 and 31.
Okay, so that's in the motion, and Sarah, you're amenable to seconding that. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of that motion? Roll call.
Motion to approve the zoning conditions. Morales?
Yes.
Weiss?
Yes.
Beresford?
Yes.
Herring?
Yes.
McLaughlin?
Yes.
Pass?
Yes.
Sams?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Lord?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Right. That brings us to the new business portion of our agenda, and the first item is 110 West Hancock Avenue. And we will begin with the staff report. Yeah, and before we begin with the staff report, we have an announcement from Planning Commissioner Athens-Clarke.
I've talked with staff and they recommend, and council, and we recommended I recuse myself. My wife is an employee of the church and I have a deep background with historic preservation, including chair of the historic preservation. And therefore I'm recusing myself from stepping out of the ring.
Okay. Give it a minute. At this item. This request is for 110 West Hancock Avenue. It is a special use permit application that's before you. The nature of the request is to accommodate the construction of a surface parking lot in the commercial downtown zone. Proposed are 14 new parking spaces. Access to those parking spaces would come off of Lumpkin Street, and we'll look at the exhibit, the binding plan here in a moment. Landscaping would also be provided as part of the plan. No waivers are requested. This request is coming to you as it is included as part of a mediation settlement agreement. Here is an aerial view of the property directly through that wall across the street. It is currently developed with a historic structure that was built in 3 parts, and you can kind of see that from the roof line depiction in the aerial. There is an amount of surface parking angled there that's also part of this subject tract. Future land use calls for downtown. That is unchanged. Zoning would be commercial downtown. That also is unchanged. Here's some photographs of the property from Hancock Avenue. So looking from Doherty. And then kind of looking down Lumpkin along the side of the existing structure at 110. This would be the binding site plan for the development of the surface parking lot. Planning staff had the opportunity to see an iteration of this and review it for compliance with the design standards for surface parking lots, and all of that feedback was provided to the applicant's design team. All of staff's code-related requests were incorporated into the design. The analysis of the request, as proposed, the subject request is incompatible with the 2023 comprehensive plan. It is incompatible with future land use map expectations for the downtown designation. And it is also incompatible with the Doherty Street downtown design area. I will leave the image up because I believe the applicant may want to refer to this. But that concludes the presentation of this item.
And at this time, we will hear from the applicant.
My name is Brett Thurman. I'm an engineer at Armstrong Beatty Thurman, and I represent Athens First United Methodist Church and their trustees. I'm not really here to talk about the plan. It's there before you. It's been vetted by the planning department. I'm here to answer any questions you may have about the plan. Thank you.
At this time, we will open it up to public comment. Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in support of this application? And is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Step right up, ma'am.
My name is Winnie O'Looney, and I'm nervous because I'm sorry, 626 Cobb Street. Yes, and I just came from the Taylor Grady House where we are working very hard to develop history as an industry in our community and to develop the Prince Avenue corridor as a statement of how this is truly a classic city that cares about keeping our history and moving forward and making it a part of that. And this is an excellent example of a building that is right in the middle and that can be very, very effective as a part of our community. The church has received a $2 million offer on this building that they bought for only 1.2 something. And this building has the potential of being a very active part of our community. 14 parking spaces is a very small benefit for the great benefit that this building offers our community. You're really the last stopgap we have. You're the last place that can say, no, look at this better. This can be a better use. This does not fit any of the plans for our community. None of the plans that we've ever made anticipated that someone would tear down a major historic building in the middle of our downtown. Look around that building. Anyway, so I really hope that you will consider this from a much broader angle than parking spaces. Thank you.
Ms. O'Looney, is there any other member of the wishing to speak in opposition?
My name is Amy Andrews. I live at 282 King Avenue, and I'm speaking to you as a longtime volunteer in the historic preservation community. I've been a trustee of the Athens-Clarke Heritage Foundation, now Historic Athens, and I am a graduate of the University of Georgia Historic Preservation Program. So I'm asking that you deny the special use permit to allow parking at this site. For one thing, it violates the designation of the building as a contributing property in the local historic, West Downtown Local Historic District. It is also premature to make this decision before the mayor and commission votes on the mediation agreement that was reached. So the decision to include this property in the local historic designation district was based on objective criteria in the ordinance, and it was treated similarly with other properties, and it's not whether or not the property owners are good or bad actors in the community. It's based on the characteristics of the property and the decision of what the public and the Athens-Clarke County feels is in the best interest of the public. One of the statements that the church has made is that the building cannot be renovated or restored in a cost-effective manner. That is a subjective statement based on their needs. It is an offer to purchase the property has been made with the opportunity to use tax incentive credits and to rehabilitate the property, which would add to the property tax digest way more than a parking lot would. And I understand that the church is only temporarily deciding this is going to be a parking lot, and they have long-term plans to develop the property. The church also states that they're responsible stewards of our properties and resources. They are, and yet they are the ones that destroyed Union Hall, which was a very successful African-American office and professional building on the corner of Washington and Hall Street, for their parking lot behind their building. So they don't always act in the interests of the public. They're acting in their interests. And so we have to make our decisions in what is best for our interests. Again, I would ask that you deny this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak in opposition?
My name is Denise Santa, and I reside at 125 South Arcadia Drive. Tonight, I'm here to speak on behalf of Historic Athens. We are here today to respectfully urge you to deny this special use request. which would allow for the demolition of the State Building in the West Downtown Historic District, as well as the replacement of just 14 parking spaces. The State Building is a critical link between Athens's East and West Downtown districts, and its significance extends beyond its walls. It is a contributing structure to the National Register of Historic Places, a recognition by the National Park Service and the Department of Interior that reflects its importance to our community's heritage. This decision is not just about saving one building, it's about respecting a process that has carefully preserved our historic districts for years, shaped by community input and thoughtful consideration. The State Building is entirely salvageable and it holds tremendous potential for adaptive reuse. It's eligible for the same federal tax credits that funded major projects like Atlanta's Ponce City Market. This building could be transformed into a boutique hotel, housing, office space, or any other beneficial community use. As we speak, a credible $2 million offer has been made by local preservationists who are eager to restore, preserve, and adapt this building, giving it a new life that serves the community. This offer provides an opportunity to preserve a vital piece of our downtown while ensuring it returns to productive taxable use. The alternative, a $300,000 demolition for, again, just 14 parking spaces, and discarding this building into the landfill would squander this historic resource and offer little in return for our community. Tonight's decision is not just about preserving one building, it is about setting a positive example for the future of Athens' historic districts. Allowing the removal of a contributing structure weakens the very foundation of the preservation efforts that we have worked so hard to establish. If we make this exception, we risk diminishing the integrity of our historic districts and ignoring the voice of the community, which has consistently supported the protection of these areas. Athens deserves better than to lose a building with such potential for so little in return. We ask that the church, a long and storied part of our community, consider the lasting impact of this decision. If the current owner cannot realize the potential of this property, we strongly encourage them to consider selling it to those who can and who are ready to invest in this building's restoration. We have an opportunity tonight to make a decision that will not only protect a vital piece of our history, but also ensure that we're shaping a future rooted in preservation, sustainability, and responsible stewardship. We urge you to honor that vision and protect the character of our downtown by preserving the State Building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak?
Jeff Bishop, 649 Hill Street. I actually didn't come here to speak to this. I didn't even know it was on the agenda, but serendipity, when Alex got up, I figured I'd need to come speak. I actually served on the Historic Preservation Commission at the time when Downtown District was created to protect downtown in this area, specifically triggered by this. I want to give you a little bit of insight because first of all, thank you for your service because I know how it goes with this kind of conversations. You guys should have had this conversation years ago. This all started, at least from my observation, Bruce can help me if I remember these, but the commission used a temporary, restraining order to keep this from being torn down years ago. And then threw it to the Historic Preservation Commission to declare a historic district to overlay, to kind of take care of not only this property, but the rest of downtown that wasn't protected in the first round. And we did protect it, and I think that was great. But what I personally saw as being part of the commission is that the church never really had that true discussion with the community that they needed to. They got kind of passively aggressively baked into the historic district. So you guys are finishing what probably should have happened with you guys before we put the historic district in. So thank you for your service on that. Personally, I don't think we need more parking lots downtown. I also think that it's right to try to protect our historic properties downtown. I was talking to my wife about this just yesterday and looking at Little Kings. And I remember working across the street in a building that's no longer there where Synovus is now. And that building was worthless. It was kind of an eyesore downtown. That whole area was kind of an eyesore. And to see what that's developed into because of historic preservation and in Athens' creative way of maintaining its past while still being progressive and growing is a perfect example. So I want to point you to that as you debate this. And then finally, the Downtown Development Authority has multiple parking spaces downtown. This community has free busing during the week. There's got to be a better way to negotiate this, which isn't in your purview, but I just throw it out there. There's other solutions to this problem. And if it's about 13 parking spaces, I hope the commission can come to the table and maybe broker a deal that makes both parties feel a little bit better, because this is a fight that hopefully will come to an end here. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Any other member of the public?
Now that I know it's okay to come for one thing, but then speak up on another one. Since Jeff just did it, nobody shouted him down. I assume I'll be able to talk on the thing I did come up here for, which is property, where I live. I want to say, I agree with the things that have been said.
You can identify yourself for the.
I'm Bertus Downs. I live at 738 Cobb Street. And I am a member of First Pres down the street from this property. And in law school, this has a unique history, this building. And the thing that I do want to emphasize, I guess I'm the fifth speaker on this, is nobody's yet mentioned the good work this church does in this community, which is amazing. United Methodist Church does as good, or, they do wonderful outreach, helping underserved communities within Athens. And this really has nothing to do with this, but I was just kind of wondering, how did it come to this, where this church that does so many good things is getting ready to tear down a building that means a lot to this town, the history of this town. And it's kind of a curiosity to me. I don't understand. I also feel like, to a certain extent, the horse is probably out of the barn, and we're all sitting up here, wasting y'all's time. It's already 7:30 and it's going to go late. So I'm going to sit down, but if there was a way that the mechanics and the way all this works, the different approvals, I agree with what Jeff said. This would have been nice to have been dealt with a long time ago, but it does sound like a, $2 million offer for what would be 14 parking places, or else the long-term development potential in a historic downtown like Athens, which is one of the reasons people like coming here. I'll now sit down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Downs. Is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak on this application?
Liz DeMarco, 327 Hill Street. And I just heard of, so I request that you all deny the special use for parking. And I just found out today that we have this option for someone to buy it. And so I haven't prepared anything, but I can't help myself, but because this building is in my purview. It's very important to Athens history. The design of the building lends itself to adaptive reuse. I would just hate I know I guess it's planned for a parking lot, but then maybe it would be developed and they would develop something that was like a fake version of what we have such a beautiful version of. Anyway, and I fully support what Gwen and Amy and Denise and Jeff and Bertus just said, everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeMarco. Is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak on this application?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Lewis. I reside at 237 Georgia Avenue. I am a member of Historic Athens, and I work as a historic preservation professional. And I'm excited about the opportunity for this parcel to be something other than a parking lot. I also was a Girl Scout leader. I can say thank you to the United Methodist Church for providing the space in the Stay building for us to have our Girl Scout meetings and the other community events that they have in that space. I can also speak to the building's deterioration and how it has unfortunately gotten to a point where it is hard to see its potential. And I can understand the church's desire for it not to be an eyesore that's under their watch any longer. I don't think a parking lot is, even if it's a temporary solution, is not an allowance that we should set a precedence for when we have a process that designates properties as important based on their history and their culture. This was reviewed not by who owns it, but by the building itself and its past. And I think respecting that community process for protecting it is important. I'm also excited that this delay has given the community and some interested parties to think about where its potential might be able to take it into the future. And so I hope that y'all will support following and trusting the process and denying the demolition based on its incompatibility with the comprehensive plan, the land use plan, and with the designation of our local historic district. And hopefully open up a time for it to be developed. I am somewhat familiar with the folks that are interested in redeveloping the property, having seen other preservation work that they do, and it is very impressive and would really give us the opportunity to have a showpiece in Athens for the kind of development that we want to happen for rehabilitated properties and potential tax credit projects. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak on this application?
Good evening. My name is Thomas Mitchell. The address is 1809 Beaufort Highway, Beaufort, Georgia. I'm the lawyer that was alluded to earlier, the attorney that's representing Athens-Clarke County in the litigation that the proposal before you is part of a mediated settlement. There's only two things. I'll answer any questions that I can, subject to privilege and things like that. But two things that I did want to point out, because I know these types of things are important, and I've heard comments from the folks that spoke in opposition. The Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission did pass a resolution authorizing approval of the mediated settlement and the initiation of the process, one piece of which is before you all. There's an important provision in that resolution that addresses something else that one of the folks said. And it's this. It says that the whereas you all have seen resolutions before, and there's a bunch of whereas clauses. One of the whereas clauses that was put in this resolution says, whereas the mayor and commission are taking the action set forth herein for the purpose of providing for the settlement of the lawsuits brought by the church, and said actions should not be seen by citizens, staff, or court as setting a new precedent for any other piece of property in the jurisdiction of ACC Gov. And so they specifically put into this resolution a provision that said that whatever the planning commission, whatever the mayor and commission does, whatever historical preservation commission did, that because this has to do with the settlement of a lawsuit, it doesn't set any precedent for any other piece of property, any other historic district, any other aspect of it. So with that, that's all I have to add, unless you all have specific questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Is there any other member of the public wishing to speak on this application? All right, with that, we'll bring it behind the rail. And I just want to start us off with the sort of if we were to consider the merits, I think that the public commenters, who I want to thank you all, I appreciate y'all coming out and speaking, and on the idea of a surface parking lot in downtown, as some of the public commenters say, our future land use map says that that is not appropriate as a use downtown, and our zoning code does not permit it as a right downtown, which is why this process is required by somebody who wants to do it. And if, my initial reaction is we're looking at a site that has 6 existing parking spots on it, accessed from Hancock Avenue, and the proposal is to up that to 14. So you're talking about tearing down a building, not for 14 new spots, but for a total of 8 new parking spots, which seems like a particularly terrible land use in the downtown zone. But my comment is more procedural than that, which is I think that this application, to me, it seems premature, given that there is an ongoing historic preservation process underway in front of the mayor and commission now for us to consider this. And so I might be inclined to table it. I think that for 2 reasons. One, the property is currently in a historic district. The applicant has requested that it be removed from the historic district, and that request is pending but has not been granted or denied at this time. So at this time, the property is still in the historic district. So I think, to me, respect for the mayor and commission's ongoing process and for the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendation to not remove it requires that we let that process play out before considering the land use proposal that's in front of us, the special use permit application. And I can imagine that some of us might feel as though the standard to apply to a special use permit application for a property in a historic district might be more exacting than for one that's out. And so the result of that process could influence, one or more people's views on this application. And the second reason I think that tabling it strikes me as appropriate is, I read very carefully the applicant's report. And as I said, it's adding a total of 8 net parking spots. But there wasn't really a case for why that is necessary for the applicant's needs. And I noted in the applicant's application, it says on page 3, the church acknowledges that there is available parking in the downtown area for the church's use on Sunday. So they, downtown is a ghost town on Sunday with a great deal of available parking. And the applicant goes on to say, however, the church programming is more than just Sunday. And of course, that's true, but there's nothing in the application that explains what they, if it says like on Wednesdays, we have this event and this many people come and our current parking is inadequate on when, or, something like that. I didn't see enough information from the applicant explaining any sort of rationale for why 8 additional spots would make a difference. And so I would be inclined again to table just to encourage the applicant to provide some explanation of what the benefit to them is. Because of course we would balance that against the public interest, but in the historic building, et cetera, and in the historic district. But it's hard to balance the private interest of the property owner against the public interest when the property owner hasn't really explained their interest in having 8 more spots on particular nights of the week. So long story short, that's just kind of my opening remark. And I see Sarah and then Kristen.
Yeah, I have a procedural note. Doesn't the applicant get a 2-minute rebuttal? Is that?
You are absolutely right. And I apologize, Mr. Thurman, you are entitled to a 2-minute rebuttal to speak to whatever the public commenters said or to anything else you've heard. The applicant declines that opportunity.
And in that case, I agree with Chair's point about the proper sequencing of things. And I know I've gotten on, people have gotten on me about not being respectful enough of other boards and their decisions. And I do think that whether or not this parcel remains in the historic district would be a factor to consider with the other criteria that we use to evaluate special use requests. I also, in addition to wanting to see more information from the applicant, as Chair just said, Matt, you also emailed a few questions. We all saw the email to Bruce trying to get some more information just about availability of downtown parking, which I think you said you asked the Downtown Development Authority. They haven't gotten back to you yet. I would like to wait until we have that information to make this decision.
Like the question.
I had Kristen next.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of echoing what's been said. I did want to note that I guess we had asked staff for some research on special uses in downtown for parking lots, and this has never been asked for before. And yeah, my position has not changed since the last time we saw this when it was denied, but yeah, I was gonna put forth a motion to table.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I had a roster in my head and I had seen Sarah put her hand up and then so maybe we should.
I think I'm just gonna echo what you all say. I want to make a motion to table for 60 days. For me, what's important is to watch this Historic Preservation Commission process play out. Let that happen, have it come back to us, so we can make a decision with a little bit more information.
Do you want to?
No, for all the reasons that were stated, Second motion to table.
Okay. So we have a motion to table for 60 days and a second. Any discussion of that motion? Okay, we do a roll call.
I think it's, who's first and second?
Sarah and Jen. Sarah's motion, Jen's second.
Motion to table. Morales,
Yes.
Lease,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yes.
Gehring,
Yes.
McLaughlin,
Yes.
Pass, Sams,
He's recused.
sorry. Sanders,
Yes.
Lord.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you to the applicant and to all of the members of the vote. And that brings us to the next item, item 2 under new business, 728 Cobb Street. We'll begin with this applicant.
Are starting with. This is for 728 Cobb Street. Special use for 728 Cobb Street is for SUP 2025-01-0057. Request is for special use in RS8, single family zoning. It's to convert an existing legal non-conforming office use into a legal forming office use. The applicant states that it would be professional services and office from our definitions of the code. One of my sheets. 2 seconds, I left the sheet open. All right, so, sorry, I was going to read out our code section 9-15-8D, which is where we are getting the special use from, so. Also.
You wanna?
The
D is right there.
So it states that it shall be the objective of Athens-Clarke County that whenever feasible, legal non-conforming uses be rendered conforming through the issuance of special use permits in accordance with chapter 9-20, which is our special use code. Conditions imposed on such permits shall strive to ameliorate the impact of such use on adjacent or nearby properties and uses permitted by the zoning classification. And also just to note, only proposed changes to the building itself are ADA requirements. All right, so we are on 728 Cobb Street. And you can see the building is right here. It's a long property, about 0.8 acres. You go down Cobb Street just a little ways, it's about 500 feet. This is the hospital here, Piedmont. And then behind the property here is all commercial properties along Prince Avenue. And the rest of the surrounding area is single family use. And this district is intended to support limited commercial and other non-residential uses designed at a neighborhood scale. As you can see in the current future land use map, is traditional neighborhood on this property. So it's for current zoning and future zoning would not change other than that it would be a special use on the RS8 property. This is an image of the front of the building. As you can see, there is the connection to the road, to the sidewalk here, and then steps are here. There is no connection between the two though. Existing signage for the business is located right about here. They're not quite in the picture, just to note. And this is a view of the back of the property. If you're standing coming out of the building itself, you can see the paved parking is all in the section here, and then gravel parking is back here, a long section. The site plan shows the building itself here. Pointed out are some of those changes that are just the ADA requirements. And these changes have been through the Historic Preservation Commission and have been approved through them as well. And this shows some of that parking here. And this is the paved parking and the gravel parking in the back. We asked the applicant to label those parking spaces. They're not actually like striped on the property itself, but here you can see about what they measure at. It's approximately 27 parking spaces. Okay, and these elevations show the front and rear of the building. Again, those are just pointing out the differences that have been approved through the HPC. Our staff recommendation is that because the building is compatible with the 2023 comprehensive plan, the limited commercial use at a neighborhood scale supports the small scale commercial near the hospital. It would be compatible with the future land use map and zoning map if this special use is approved. And with the ordinances, if the conditions that we suggest are used as well. And we found that, staff found that the special use criteria have been satisfied. And our recommended conditions are that a sidewalk connection shall be constructed between the front porch stairs and the public sidewalk. And that the unpaved and unpermitted parking, which is that gravel in the back of the house, that was in existence at the time of this application shall be removed and the area revegetated.
Thank you. This time we will hear from the applicant.
Hi, I'm Brad Spur, the owner and applicant. Really hoping that this will be less contentious than the last application. I think it will be, not tearing anything down, obviously. Oh, sorry, my home address is 160 Stafford Drive in Athens. And I really appreciate staff's help in preparing that very comprehensive report. Again, we have this plan to restore this property. Used to be Dr. Lockman's dermatology practice for many years. But it's, in my opinion, has always begged to be a law office. You can look at it and see that was its destiny. But yeah, the plan is to really do some extensive work here, preserve the property, make sure it continues in existence for many years. And again, the staff report is very comprehensive, except all the conditions, the new walkway leading from the street to the stairs and the removal of that gravel parking lot in the back. And I apologize because I did a really bad job at outreach to my neighbors on this. And just kind of recently touching base with them, talking about, I think when they saw the rezone sign in the front yard, it kind of, raised some red flags. People got concerned. So, and first and foremost, I want happy neighbors in all this. So if there's any other conditions folks in the neighborhood are asking, I'm sure we can work those out too.
All right. We'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in support of this proposal?
Good evening. I am Maggie Taylor, address 175 Hillcrest Avenue. Tonight I'm here as board chair of Historic Cobham Foundation, offering our support of the applicant's proposed use. We are very appreciative to have Brad in the neighborhood and the great care that he's taking to restore the structure, which needs a lot of work. So to that point, yes. Thank you, Brad. I will note our neighbors who have some concerns with the use of a special use permit. So you're going to hear more in opposition of the pathway and kind of the procedure that we're going forth with this evening. But just wanted to say a note of appreciation for Brad and his efforts. Thank you.
Taylor, is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak in support of this application? Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in opposition to this application?
Hi, I'm Clint McCrory. I live at 390 Franklin Street. I and other neighbors of this property, I live about 4 blocks from Maggie lives within sight of it. We're not actually opposed to what Mr. Spur wants to do. In fact, the amount of work that he's going to have to do is mind-boggling. He's going to have to raise the house to replace the foundation, which has a lot of water damage, and it's going to have to be raised to prevent further damage in the future. So he's going to invest heavily in this, and it's going to look very good. Neighbors have a lot of concern about this application of special use permit. We want to use this process to support the residential character of the neighborhood.
Mr. McCrory, can I, if you're able, can you speak a bit louder? Make sure everybody behind you can hear you as well.
So I believe this is a relatively new application of a special use permit. Purpose is to make grandfathered use into a conforming use. One question which we've had in discussing this is the code uses the term legal non-conforming use. A small question is that synonymous with grandfathered use? Or are there other legal non-conforming uses besides grandfather? Has this application of special use permit been made before in Athens-Clarke County? Is there any, do we have any history? Are we the first guinea pigs for this new use of special use permit? Is special use permits used in this manner in other cities in Georgia? The problem is that this use of special use permit seems to weaken the special use permit itself. As you know, professional services and office are not allowed in residential zones in Athens, even with the special use permit. So that it's confusing to someone who looks at the code and doesn't notice this section about this very particular use of special use. What if somebody says this way of applying special use sets a precedent for this in other residential neighborhoods for if someone wants to institute an office use zone, that they can do this through a special use. I know that's not your intention. It seems that that possibility exists. And what happens when the property is sold? If it's sold for any office use, is a new special use permit required? We have other concerns which other speakers will address.
Thank you, Mr. McCrory. And Bruce, if it's not inappropriate, I'll just say a few words in case there are overlapping questions to the question Mr. McCrory just asked that may be of use to the public. So In our code, there are use tables that say in particular zones that particular uses are allowed or are not allowed, and or sometimes are only allowed by special use permit. An example of that is the Hancock Street one that we talked about a few minutes ago. The parking lot in downtown is only allowed as a special use permit. The second use that our code makes for special use permits is to take what we call a legal non-conforming use, which is colloquially called grandfathered in. That is, you can't do an office in RS8 zoning today, but that's a rule that was enacted at some point after this particular property had already begun to be used as an office. And so it's grandfathered in, which is to say it is a legal non-conforming use. It's not allowed to do it in a new use that way, but if somebody was doing it when the law changed, they can keep doing it as long as they want. So that's the status of this property. At this time, it is a legal non-conforming use for professional office. The owner of a property that is a grandfathered in legal non-conforming use can at any time ask us to recommend and the Merit Commission ultimately to approve, making that grandfathered in status, turning it from legal non-conforming to conforming use by virtue of a special use permit. And Bruce, correct me if I got any of that technical stuff wrong, but that's what the applicant, he's entitled to ask us to turn it from grandfathered to a conforming use blessed by a special use permit. As I understand it, whether that special use permit is issued or not, because it's grandfathered in, it can continue to be used as a professional office, regardless of the decision on the special use permit that the Merit Commission may make. So I hope that that is of use to Mr. McCrory or anybody else who wondered about the purpose of this process and how it all ties into the zoning code.
And change of ownership would not impact.
Would not impact either of those. Correct. It would, yeah, change of ownership does not take away a grandfathered use, nor does it alter a special use permit. It would just continue if it were to change hands again at some point in the future. But at any time, an owner of that property could stop doing a grandfathered use or stop doing a special use permit professional office and turn it into a home if they wanted to at any time. And that would forfeit the special use permit or the grandfathered status. And then it could never go back to being professional office once it was converted. So I hope that's helpful. We're still in the public comment phase, but I just wanted to address Mr. McCrory's questions. So is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak on this application?
My name is Margie Spalding. I live at 739 Cobb Street. And I do have a question because I think if somebody stops using a building that's non-conforming as that, then it reverts back and it's no longer allowed to be used. Is that correct?
If it's abandoned, if
it's no longer used as an office.
Correct. If a legal non-conforming use is abandoned, so if it's vacant in between users, that wouldn't necessarily satisfy abandonment. But you're right that an owner can lose the grandfathered status.
Right. But if it's got a special use permit on it, that's not the case. Is that correct? Or does the special use go away if the next owner, for instance, wanted to live in it?
Yeah, it could continue.
It could continue, or it stays at special use.
It could return. So that was actually a statement that was made. If a special use is approved, that has a binding plan, binding report, binding scope, that rides with the property. If you're no longer legal non-conforming then, so the abandonment issue doesn't factor. You're now conforming, you're conforming to that site plan. So you've now added office use as an approved use of that property for the future. If it were to be a house for a period of time, they'd be able to come back and be an office again at some point in the future, as long as it complies with the binding plan with the special use. It rides with the property. Yeah.
Then I have just a little background. About 50 years ago, we started working on zoning on our neighborhood. And one of the things that we fought against a lot was little incremental spot zoning. This really feels like spot zoning. I know it isn't, but it feels like it because it's a permanent change to a residential property. So it means that if I hear you right, somebody down the line sells it and somebody lives in it, but then they sell it and it could go right back to being an office again. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a big one for me. I would ask you not to do that. It's very unlikely that that's going to happen, but it's sort of a precedent as well. And also have some questions about the precedents.
Give you some extra time since that was yammering.
Yeah. What sort of precedent would it set for other neighborhoods? I mean, would everyone have to come up and worry about a building that's non-conforming then suddenly being able to stay as a business within a neighborhood forever? If the owners wanted that, I think that's a bad precedent. I just want to say one other quick thing, that part of the staff report, and this is not to do with this issue tonight, but describe the house as, quote, supporting the healthcare node around the hospital. Well, we want to be clear that we are near the hospital, but we're not of the hospital. Our historic district has a clear boundary line, and I would want you to remember that when you're looking at it. And I would hope you won't approve this special use. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Is there any other member of the public wishing?
Jeff Bishop, 649 Hill Street. So a couple of things. First, I want to point out, obviously, you guys know this is a historic neighborhood. I think that puts, when I was on the Historic Preservation Commission, we had unique properties that kind of had special consideration. And to me, when you're talking about special use, a historic district puts an extra layer of scrutiny that you guys need to put on this. I think that's fair to the neighborhood and to the notion of historic preservation. That being said, this is not only protected, this happens to be the first protected neighborhood in Clarke County. It actually was basically what spurred on what you see, what you appreciate in Clarke County is historic preservation, downtown being preserved, other neighborhoods. So this was the foundation of historic preservation. This property was grandfathered in as part of this zoning change. And it was understood, okay, this property owner has rights. He bought into this with rights. So he's operating as a sole proprietorship, and it's a single use as a doctor's office. And he's grandfathered in, rightfully so, and it ran its course. Because of the way the code's written, the new buyer has a right to take over this. They did not lose that grandfather protection. So that's fine and dandy. My big concern is, well, first of all, I noted too, staff saying that this is great, it fits in the node. This is actually single family. It has nothing to do with hospital commercial. So this property just happened to be lucky to be in there. So I was kind of disappointed to see that as part of a selling point of this. And I also know when staff approves something, you kind of got a yes that you got to work against. So we're trying to work against that. But here's my big thing. A non-conforming use, it specifically says in the section 915.8 that a non-conforming use should not ameliorate the impact of such use on adjacent or nearby properties. I'm very concerned in the use, it's going from one office to 6. And the staff I called today and they said that values of properties aren't really in the staff's purview, but to change it to 6 rental units, you're amplifying the revenue stream that's going to come from this property as commercial. And I think that the spirit of grandfathering was to ultimately let highest and best use be residential, which is what it's supposed to be based on the current zoning. And I think amplifying that cash flow is going to basically make this a commercial property for perpetuity. And I think that works against the word ameliorate. It actually works polar opposite of that. It's the antonym of ameliorate. Now, I want to point that out. I think there's actually something in our code that helps speak to what's being asked for. I think the use of the property as a law firm is great, but breaking it into 6 more pieces, staff noted that they didn't think it would create more traffic. I hardly disagree on that. You're taking one business and turning it into potentially 6. I think that could amplify traffic, and that's a big deal in a single family neighborhood. And again, last thing, millions of dollars were spent to renovate houses here. And there was a tax freeze that the county helped subsidize homeowners. So there's been a lot of money invested to make this single family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Is there any other member of the public wishing to speak?
I'm Bob Burris. Downs, I still live at 738 Cobb Street, and my neighbor, right here, we have a lot of personal knowledge about this house because we lived next to David Lockman for a better part of 40 years. And having an office as a neighbor, it's great. Not everybody does. Having Popeyes and Crystal at the backyard, not as good, but you know, we bought in knowing we were buying next to a doctor's office that doesn't have a lot of parties at night and doesn't have some of the things that neighbors might have, like human neighbors, fast food, different considerations. So I actually, in addition to thinking we should strike from the record, correct the record about something about the hospital and commercial nodes and all that stuff, which really doesn't seem to have any applicability here. But I'm not professional, but that seems like it's not really relevant. I also slightly disagree with my future neighbor, who I'm very, very happy is doing this massive amount of work to get this house stabilized, foundation redone, fix it up nice, make it look great, and be great. But I don't think this house is crying out to be a lawyer's office. I think it's crying out to be a home for a family someday, maybe. And if not, if you're a lot younger than me, you're going to be practicing there a long time, and so will the other lawyers. That's great. But it is a residential street, and we already have anybody who lives anywhere near there. We already have people going real fast down a narrow street. So certainly the on-street parking, which I'm glad is already, I think it's a condition. If it's not, it ought to be. But I do think that this word Jeff just pointed out to me, ameliorate, means to improve, I think, or it means to get rid of the problems of commercial districts right next to or in the midst of. This is not on the edge of the neighborhood. It's into the neighborhood. It's well into the neighborhood, fifth house from King. So I just, we are coming in with mixed feelings about this. We're in support and against, but what we really want is the conditions to be with teeth. And we want to be sure that in terms of the street parking, the thing I seem to be, for some reason, focused on is signage. And I like the sign that's there now. It's pretty low key. You don't see it as you're speeding by the straightaway. But then I look around town, and just yesterday, because I wanted to have something to hold up here. I hope we're not getting we're not going to get signs like this. I hope, because these are signs on Millage and Chase, and they look great on Millage and Chase. They tell you what you need to know about the various offices, including lawyers. And I'm hoping that I think the time's up. No, it's close. I hope that there's sign restrictions that really mean something, and things like lights on the signs, or, you know, what looks like Lower Prince Avenue right now, which on Lower Prince Avenue is okay, whatever, that's the way the sign ordinance works. But I'm assuming that between the historic overlay and the existing sign ordinance, that sign's going to look pretty close to what Lockman has right now. Am I leaving anything out? I think that's time's up. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Downs. Is there any other member wishing to speak?
Anybody else?
I would too. Hi, my name is Teresa Cullen, and I live directly across from Dr. Lockman's old office. I live at 731. I moved in over 45 years ago when Dr. Gomez had it, if any of you remember that. And the special feature of it was there was a trailer park behind it, which he had an investment in, I assume. Why else would you have a trailer park behind your office? That didn't stop me from wanting to live there. We had to interview with the family that owned the house. It didn't go through any other hands. We went to interview with them, and we had to present ourselves as a wonderful family. We had one child at that point and told her to shut up, behave, and don't ask any questions. The house was a wreck, and we invested every
bit of money that we had in making it the wonderful house it is now. I am telling you, this neighborhood has changed drastically. We have little children there now running all over the place. It was when I moved in, full of 80-year-olds living there. It is wonderfully neighborly as well. We look after each other. We walk dogs when people are away. We have a community there. And this special use does not fit our sense of community. It's nothing against you, Brad. I don't even know you. But I am telling you that this is a special neighborhood. And recently we had a tour of homes. 18 homes went open. I was one of them. I've never done that in my life, but because my neighbors wanted me to do it, I did it. That tells you something about the neighborhood that you should consider when you are changing the tone of it. We hoped for years that it would stay with a family after Dr. Lockman went away. There was an offer on it. He did not accept it because it was an issue of money. So I'm asking you to think beyond that and look at the fabric of the neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bellin. Is there any other member of the public wishing to speak on this application?
I'm Gwen O'Looney. I still live at 626 Cobb, and this is why I came to. You know, we were so disappointed when Lockman left that did not become residential, and there were some great opportunities and people that worked. Everything I've heard about Brad here is great. Everything, but this special use idea is scary to us. My house, when I bought it in 1982 for $43,000, there were 16 people living on my property. It was definitely non-conforming. And slowly over the years, we have recovered sanity. And, but I really feel like that the big change that you're looking at right now is going from one office with one known name that did expand. It was one doctor and then it was 3 by the time he left. And we saw the difference in our community from that change. That small change changed the number of people coming up and down our street. The idea of putting 6 in there, 6 rental offices, that's an apartment house. And if this were a residential facility and they wanted 6 units, it would be an apartment house. We cannot allow this to become allowed, because if we do, we'll move into a position where we are out of control of that property and it is able to be that large an institution, a commercial entity in a residential neighborhood that, as Teresa did a good job of saying, is a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. So please, like I said, I don't mind. I think this guy is great. He's taken on a huge challenge, but his opportunity could be our loss of the opportunity of one day recovering this house. We don't want this institution. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public here wishing to speak on this application? All right. Public comments? Yes. Mr. Spur, you are entitled to a response.
Oh, yeah, just briefly. And this is where I dropped the ball because I should have been having these conversations with my neighbors much, much earlier. I just got so busy at the new year. But as Mr. Hall stated, the property is currently under this legal non-conforming use status, which means I could operate it as a business as it stands.
in my opinion, and this is where kind of having these conversations beforehand would have helped. I think the special use permit really is in the neighborhood's best interest. You know, rather than this property being under this nebulous designation of a non-conforming use where, as far as I understand, the only restriction is I can't expand the use. The special use permit process really gives us the opportunity to exactly what I can do. And again, I'm only asking for the property to be used for professional office space. And it also allows us to, put in these guardrails, these restrictions for limited impact on the surrounding neighborhood. So, and again, I fully accept the conditions, staff support. Bertus mentioned no on-street parking. I actually did mention that in my application or the narrative application. I fully support that. And I would really be open to any other restrictions that my neighbors propose, as long as we have something definable that I can, kind of put on paper. Just, and also so it doesn't hamstring me to operate a business. And I'll continue having conversations with my neighbors. Obviously, I would ask the commission approve the petition or the application. I understand there's probably an option to table it. I prefer that not be done, because that just kind of puts me another cycle behind actually being able to use the property and get the work done. But that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Spurr. And actually, let me ask you a question. Can you talk about the number of offices? I'm interested in hearing more about that. Been used by one doctor, it would now be used by more than one professional person in your intended use. Is that?
So potentially, so currently I'm just a solo practitioner. I would have staff, but there would just be additional office space available. So I just put that in the application because I would like that. And I didn't want to hide the ball. I mean, if it's permitted, I would like to rent it to other professional office space businesses. But these would truly kind of be in the same ilk as mine. They would more than likely be solopreneurs. This is not really set up to operate multiple businesses. It's really just multiple people who might potentially have different client sets. And I only put the number 6 in there because there is literally only 6 office spaces. That would be the absolute maximum. But hope not.
Okay, thank you. Public comment, and we will bring it back behind the rail. Who wants to start us off? Alex and then Sarah.
He can go in and put his law office in right now. All is well. He can sell it to the next person. They can go and put in any kind of office, basically, they would like. There it is. But if he sells it to somebody or any user turns it back into residential, if he decides I want a law office somewhere else and now I want to live in this house, and he does that as is, it cannot go back to, I actually should be talking to staff. It cannot go back to office without some special permission from the county, correct?
I mean, it would be, you'd have to rezone the property.
Right. I mean, it'd have to go through a process like any house on the block would have to do. Okay. So, but with this, it can bounce back and forth. I'm looking for the true advantage of voting yes on this. So if we vote for this as a yes, he can sell it to somebody who then lives in it. He can sell it to somebody who can go right back to office. Is that what is gained by doing this?
That's correct. That office use and the condition of the property as represented on that plan becomes one additional special use that has now been permitted, if the mayor and commission were to approve it, to be used on that property. No other use. So it really is just office.
I just wanted to point out something that If I understood correctly, something that you said earlier, Bruce, and I may not have, there's something relevant in section 9-20-7. It says, which is our special use section of our ordinances. The last sentence says, if the specially permitted use is discontinued for a period exceeding 12 months, or the specially permitted use is replaced by a use otherwise permitted in the zoning district, it shall be deemed abandoned and the special use permit shall be deemed revoked. So if I'm understanding that right, like 12 months of abandonment automatically revokes a special use permit, just like 12 months of abandonment automatically revokes grandfather status.
Correct.
Okay.
There is a 12-month window in there where there is the allowance for things to move. In that second sentence, I'm glad you read that. I appreciate the clarification on that. Establishment of the uses that are permitted in the zone, I misspoke earlier, would constitute abandonment of the special use.
Okay, so if Mr. Spur used it as a law office for 20 years and then sold it to somebody who made it a residence, and they made it a residence for 12 months, the special use permit just goes away without any action by anybody. It automatically disappears, and then it's permanently just a residence.
Well, anything else that the RS
Under RS8.
zoning is allowed, correct?
So it can't bounce back if
Can't bounce
if it's something other than office for 12 months.
For 12 months.
Right, if it's a by right use in RS8, which basically means single family, then for 12 months, then that's it. That's all it can be. So are you done out to Sarah Beresford?
I'll come back later, but I'm
Okay.
done for the moment.
Sarah B, and
I
that's.
think it's kind of continuing the question. What would make somebody want to get a special use permit to codify their grandfathered use? What's the motivation for that? Is it anticipating that they're going to be doing 24 months of work on a house? And in the process of doing that, that's gonna qualify as abandoning the use, or is it just somebody wanting to operate above board? Or what are you, when we see this so seldom, but when you have seen it, what do you see as the motivation?
So you're giving two excellent examples. Another example that does pop up from time to time is documentation for a lender. They're not comfortable providing a loan product for something that is deemed non-conforming with local zoning. And
Okay.
sometimes that's a hurdle that makes it very hard to get a loan to do a rehab.
Okay, that makes sense. But in either circumstance, whether the legal non-conforming use just continues as is, with different practitioner, but same use, or gets a special use permit, if the use is abandoned for 12 months, either scenario, it reverts back to the zoned use.
It loses the ability to continue the legal nonconformity.
Okay.
That's right.
Sarah, Darren.
Yep, I was about to just ask the same question. So it sounds like the main purpose of this permitting process is probably so that the applicant can get a loan to do all of this necessary work. And it sounds like it's gonna be the same use that it's been since the 70s. So this is a vote to change nothing. What it looks like to me for things to stay in this neighborhood exactly as they have been for dozens of years, for
1975, I think.
1975. I can't do basic, but how many years is that? 50. Keep things as they have been for 50 years. Which is normally what everyone wants us to do. Keep things as they have been for this past 50 years. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter what we say because, this is in District 2. District 2 commissioner is gonna put on whatever conditions the District 2 commissioner wants to do. And what we say won't really matter at all. But I think that it makes plenty of sense for a doctor's office to be used as a lawyer's office. And it sounds like it's gonna do some good for the neighborhood by rehabbing this home.
I agree. She essentially said what I wrote down. We're sinking. But yeah, I mean, it's an improvement to the property. And just in reading the compliance notes, there's already a considerable amount of parking in the rear of the building. That was one of my concerns is what changes, but yeah, I don't see any significant changes. The other thing is it's been in operation for decades. So there's no additional expansion from what I'm seeing here. So yeah, I would be in favor of the special use.
Yeah, and then Mike.
Just a clarification. So it sounds like the neighborhood's concern is that this could set a precedent for other homes to become used for commercial purposes. But my knowledge of this property is that it's a grandfathered in use. It's always been in office. Are we setting any precedent if we give this special permission? Nobody could come in and convert any of the other homes in Cobham to commercial use, which sounds like it's the concern of the neighborhood, that this would set a precedent for other homes to convert to commercial usage. And that's not doing that here, correct?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to follow up on kind of some of the speculating that we were doing a second ago about kind of the motivations for needing the special use and how it might help with a loan or whatnot. And maybe I would like to ask the applicant if there is anything specific, like why you think you need the special use and what benefit that would be.
Well, and my initial purpose, and I probably will need a loan. This is all long. But I haven't gone down that road of securing financing yet because I kind of wanted to clear this hurdle first. But yeah, my initial purpose was just to kind of bring this above board. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but I cannot recall the code section, but it's also in the code. It says you're encouraged to render this non-conforming use conforming through the use of the special use permit process. That was just I'm a rule follower. I like to dot all my i's and cross all my t's. That was the initial purpose.
Thanks. Alex.
As a historic preservation fella, I love that this gentleman is buying this home and renovating it, and it sounds like an awful lot of work. It's hard enough to pick up a table while you get a piece of carpet underneath it, but I can't imagine lifting a house and doing what he's gonna have to do. You may want to keep thinking about that, but I know that's been there for 50 years, but it slipped through before the regulations were there, if I understand right. There was nothing to stop that to become commercial house and slap in the middle of a neighborhood. And when we talk about future land use in our steering committee, we talk about transitions. And that's not a transition property, say, from King Avenue. First couple of properties are, and they're mixed density. And the further you get in, the less something different should be. It changes the fabric of the neighborhood. And the whole idea, the nice lawyer, hopefully he'll get other nice lawyers to rent from him. It's not always a nice lawyer that wants to move in places. And it just continues to set. And I'm still trying to get some of the major differences in going through this process and not going through the process, because it sounds like as is, it just can continue to flip. But it's a little weaker if I vote no on this than if I vote yes. The chances of that staying full as a commercial use for any type of office maybe is a little thinner down the road, and maybe that neighborhood can come back to a full neighborhood. That's what I have going on. And I see the neighborhood may be different than others do, but I would not be in favor of anything that gave an advantage to that house as being any type of commercial. And it appears there is just enough of that to keep me on a no on this.
Kristen, I'm sorry, wait, I had Sarah and then Kristen.
I just wanted to object to a little of the language you just used. The idea of this use having like snuck in, because it happened historically, like historically, neighborhoods had mixed uses in them, even if they all kind of looked the same. If you go to a historic district anywhere, including historic, neighborhoods around here, you see houses, like, just look at Village. You see houses that people ran their offices out of. Sometimes they lived in them also, sometimes they didn't, but like, that when we are talking about, and this relates to future land use, when we're talking about a walkable neighborhood, often when we're in here, we are talking about like, a walkable subdivision. That's something that has nice sidewalks and nice trees on it. That's not what walkable means. What walkable means is that there are places to walk to of different kinds within walking distance within the neighborhood. And I think that we're seeing it, and I feel very strongly about this, so please don't take personally my tone. It's not directed at you. But we see it in the Lakewood development that we just put forward. That is something that is harkening back to that traditional development style where we had mixed uses. So this wasn't like a mistake or some subterfuge that someone pulled off before we had laws. Like, that was just how neighborhoods developed. Also, just something about historic, also someone mentioned signs. I think that the signage falls under the purview of the HPC. And I just wanted to note that I think that this is different than the Hancock parcel that we looked at in terms of, because I know that the HPC had to make a decision about this too, right? Did they already make it? Did it go to the Mayor Commission?
You're talking about this property with this?
Yeah, or did that not have to go to the Mayor Commission?
No, it does not. Right, it's stopped.
It's a different kind of thing. Yeah, I wanted to just kind of point that out as to if it appeared there was any consistency, there's not, because that HPC thing is not. And any fear about signage or stuff like that, that is an HPC concern. And it is something that they have to look at.
Kristen, and then I have a couple of comments.
Yeah, I was actually going the same mindset that Sarah went. I mean, I live in a legal non-conforming house in a residential neighborhood because it is a duplex, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of duplexes and single family neighborhoods. They're totally fine. But these things just happen in historic neighborhoods where we now have zoning, which makes people question things like home-based businesses, whereas before it was never a question. Lots of people had businesses in their houses. So yeah, I actually think it's kind of interesting to have a business in your neighborhood and have something that you can walk to. And also the fact that because yes, the parking lot currently is really big, and the fact that it's going to be made smaller, you're kind of, in a sense, limiting the number of people that can even be in the building at any one moment, just because there's a certain number of parking spaces anyway. And yeah, that's and that it's been there for more than 50 years, really, because it has had a long history of being a quasi-commercial building. So it's fascinating to me, actually. And in a sense, one could argue that that's even part of the fabric of the neighborhood. So yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention that the existing legal non-conforming status is the applicant is legally allowed to continue using it as an office, including, as I understand it, to rent one of the parlors to another lawyer or professional or something like that. And so I don't actually see any way in which the granting of the special use permit gives additional rights for the non-conforming use. It does I appreciate Bruce's comments about lenders that I did not know, but if getting a construction loan for all of this extensive work to do it right, which I'm sure all of the neighbors, want it done right. You know, if that requires that it be, you know, not just a legal non-conforming use, but a conforming use by virtue of a special use permit, then that's in everyone's interest. I will say, Section 9-20-6 of the code allows us as part of a special use approval to impose any appropriate conditions, including but not limited to regulation of building materials, textures, colors, and architectural features. And so I think it would be well within our purview to attach a condition that says the signage cannot be lighted or larger than what exists, which I heard some neighbors talk about. That seems very reasonable. It certainly is not just an HPC thing, what the signage looks like. We're allowed to do.
But why would we?
Because a big lighted sign.
Is that allowed in a historic district?
I don't know.
Sign regulations do exist outside of the zoning code that y'all are charged with managing. So I'm looking at Austin, but I believe a reach into having any kind of signage regulation as a condition of approval is going to be beyond the scope of what the planning commission can take up. To Sarah's point, the Historic Preservation Commission does have design review of signage. What's interesting is, not to muddy this, I'm going to try to say this in a way that doesn't. The design guidelines, they don't look at use. Right? So this is a residential neighborhood from the HPC standpoint, it is not a commercial structure. Therefore, signage in front of the house would be something that would be atypical and it typically would not be supported. So where the HPC has found themselves, as well as staff, period, is the sign that's there is also a legal non-conforming feature. We're able to retain that amount of signage in that location at that height in the condition that it is today. The owner can repair it, you know, and keep it in good shape, but they wouldn't be able to add to it. I believe it's an unlit sign now, I think. Yes. It would have to remain so. The condition that it is in terms of placement and size and material would have to stay unchanged or get diminished. Could not get bigger, could not move. Because it is one of those legal but non-conforming features of the property.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think Mr. Bishop mentioned earlier that it says it's the policy of Athens-Clarke County to, when feasible, convert legal non-conforming use to conforming use through issuance of a special use permit, but that in so doing, we should strive to ameliorate any effects on adjoining properties. And so I think that gives us ample authority to attach a condition that says sign can't be lighted, can't be different in size or location from the existing sign, which, as you said, the legal non-conforming status that allows that sign to continue to exist means he can't expand it or light it. And if we're allowed to attach conditions to ameliorate effects on adjacent properties, then I would think we can do that, particularly because, again, it's 9-20-6 conditions. It says the conditions which the approval authority may impose include, but are not limited to the following. It lists limitations on architectural features, fences and walls, landscaping, including screening and buffering, regulation of hours of operation, any condition permitted by Chapter 9-25 Site Design and Use Standards, and also any other conditions which will make possible the development of Athens-Clarke County in an orderly and efficient manner and in accordance with the provisions of this title. So that catch-all, I think we can certainly say this, just like the legal non-conforming use can't expand the sign or light the sign, that we would want that to be a condition of an SUP if it were granted. Actually, I have a question for the applicant, Mr. Spur, if you don't mind. Would you have any objection to a condition along those lines?
So and certainly not non-lighted sign. I have no problem there. Just don't know. It's been a while since I looked at that current sign, what the square footage is. I want to say it's like 3x4, which is pretty small. If there's any way to get just a little bit larger than that, that would.
Well, it might be the outside what you were describing, Bruce, I think means that that's kind of already baked in to the special use process.
No.
To the legal mind.
It's separate from special use.
So but is it part of allowing a use to continue?
The sign itself is not a use.
Okay, and so what you were describing earlier, where it can't get any bigger, that lives in what code? That lives in the signage code?
Well, I mean, it's a property right. They're allowed to retain in its condition, and they have the ability to keep it in good shape, to continue to enjoy that right. But there's no provision, the RS zoning, the sign ordinance, there's nothing in the zoning code that would allow for additional signage. In fact, if, you know, again, I don't want to go too far down this road, but if somebody were converting that house today, signage would be discussed separately. And the RS zoning, if it somehow was able to stay RS, you wouldn't be able to have a sign at all.
Right.
So that's where we have found ourselves, is that we have an existing condition on this property. And the amelioration, I think, my reading of it would be, if there's any reduce it, then that's okay. Like that, if there were to reduce it, whether, you know, if there was something about this site where that sign was in a site triangle, or, you know, there was some other aspect that wasn't related to the fact that it was a sign, it was an obstruction, we would have had a condition asking for it to be reduced. Not eliminated, but reduced to address that other thing, much like we've talked about with the sidewalk or the parking in the rear. But the signage itself is separate.
So with this, I think, Bruce hit on it. I think your initial answer was right. You know, Title VII deals with the sign regulations. Title IX deals with zoning regulations and planning. So I think any conditions, we're talking about a special use permit, so any conditions necessarily have to tie to or should tie to the use of the property itself. Especially because that catch-all condition says such other conditions as will make possible the development of Athens-Clarke County in an orderly and efficient manner and in accordance with the provisions of this title. So I don't think the planning commission would have jurisdiction or sort of authority to impose something, but tied to the special use that's
It's about signs.
not tied to the use.
But I do want to say, I think the spirit of what you're suggesting with this is already the practice. So that it would stay unlit, it wouldn't get any bigger, couldn't be adapted into some other kind of placement or anything else.
I guess if I understand correctly, then there's currently a non-conforming sign. Our special use permit can't make that okay because you're saying we're not allowed to touch on the sign. So I'm looking at Title VII, which has a section on non-conforming signs, 7-4-8. And it says, non-conforming permanent signs may be continued in operation, but shall not be changed or replaced with another non-conforming sign, enlarged, extended, et cetera. So the existing sign already under Title 7-4-8 cannot be expanded, altered in character, lighted, et cetera, regardless of what we do on the special use permit. So we don't need to add that condition. That's already how it is. The sign, Mr. Spur, it cannot expand by a single square inch, I gather, under the terms of that title. That's right. Okay, I'm happy with that. Chris. Wait, I'm sorry. I cut off Mike a moment ago. Mike.
I was just gonna ask the exact same thing that you got to eventually, that if we didn't have any conditions, if this granting the special use would change the sign at all, and it sounds like no. So that was the exact same place. No, that's okay. We got same thing.
So my question, and I think it might be for staff and then maybe to the applicant, but I'll be honest, my only red flag really that went up was the sidewalk from to install the sidewalk from, I guess, the stairs that go up from the street to the front door. Is that correct? That's one of the conditions? And the reason it gave me pause was, you know, I have also visited that dermatologist and, you know, I wouldn't even think to go in the front door. You would drive around to the back. And I would think, as I'm trying to put myself in the neighbor's shoes, and I also wouldn't want a bunch of people walking up and down in front of the house. Now, I don't know how that house is set up, but I know currently you would come in and out from the back. And I would think to sort of alleviate lots of foot traffic and it being really obvious that it is a commercial business, I would want the entrance and exit to be off the back. So historic preservation aside, that was why I was questioning whether we even needed this front walkway unless it made it somehow ADA compliant or something like that. But that was my red flag, like, do we really need to have this entrance that goes in from the street when really all of the traffic should be behind the house to sort of alleviate that, a lot of that sort of commercial use?
The justification for that condition coming from staff was with new residential construction. I understand this isn't a historic district, but there is a requirement of a community standard that the front door has a walkway connecting to the public sidewalk. Not because it's commercial, but because it's residential. So that is something that we look for as a community standard with new residential construction. Now, the commercial aspect of this, that is a secondary concern from the way we worded it, but I hear your point.
And I also, given that the house could down the road convert back into being residential, I'd hate to add this window dressing of new construction when it's not, it's just like a thing that we're adding. I just feel like it's like a thing that's getting tacked on because we now have to go through this official process. And I just question if it's even necessary as part of everything else that's going on with all of this. And I feel like without the sidewalk, it might at least make it a little bit more clear that we're not going in and out up the front walk. We're going behind the house and we're doing our business. That's just where I'm coming from. So.
Yeah, I had not thought of that, but I agree with Kristen that maybe that condition doesn't ameliorate the effects on the neighborhood, but it increases the likelihood of a client parking on the street to walk up to the front door. And so perhaps it's better for the neighborhood to just leave that in the discretion of the owner if he wants to put a sidewalk or flagstones. It's a historic district. I live in the same historic district a few blocks away. Some of my neighbors have flagstones across the lawn to the front door. I wouldn't want to necessarily require a sidewalk. I'm not sure that concrete is what was historic in 1905 or whenever this house was built for walkways. And Kristen makes a good point too. So I might be inclined to not include the first of the two staff conditions. Alex.
So I do want to add this, that historically businesses mixed into neighborhoods were on corners, typically corners. They were desirable more on the corners, on the edges of the blocks. The businesses that were scattered throughout neighborhoods, mechanics, a lot of shops like that, those have been moved out because they are less desirable in the middle of neighborhoods. So yes, there were businesses in these neighborhoods, but you can go around and you can see at certain corners, Chase and Hancock. There's several that have been converted into homes, but they were businesses because that's where locally, desirably for the neighborhood, you would walk and go to that. So just pointing that out more for the record, because we're being recorded and mayor and commission may be watching, that there's a reason that businesses have sort of been pushed out of neighborhoods into the edges of neighborhoods or further out to Prince. So just stating that for the record as much as anything. Interesting about the walk into the front door. I'm like, don't put it in. It's just more to do. But we've also had conversation in here that this is good for the neighborhood and the neighborhood might want to go do it. Well, you want to walk your children up those steps and into the front rather than through the driveway because we're trying to be a walkable society. And if you're doing the driveway and cars coming out, then you got to scoot over and now you stepped into the mud and this and that. So that's why you have that. And that's why that would be, I don't honestly care which way that one goes. It's but it makes it more neighborly to come over and use that attorney because I can just walk over there nice and easy. So just tossing that in.
Okay, I've got Sarah Beresford, then Daring, then Mike.
I think for me on this one, I struggle only in the sense that I don't have any problem with this continuing to have this use of this property, whether it's legal non-conforming or with a special use permit. I have personal experience with how expensive it is to restore a house. And I think somebody wanting to do this in a way that's above board and is about to make a huge investment in the neighborhood that will be, long run from an architectural standpoint will be really great. And so I hope the applicant continues on this plan regardless, but I'm pretty sensitive to that the permit might be necessary to free up the funds to do this work. If this reverts to, well, I hope it doesn't revert to single family, but I don't really like the idea of setting up a scenario where somebody has to have a $2+ million house budget to buy a house in this condition and then fix it up to a beautiful house that it could be. And then here we have somebody who wants to do that. So I realize I'm kind of all over the place. I also don't really care about the sidewalk one way or the other, but I think for me, I am inclined to go with the staff recommendation. And let the process play out. I also kind of hear what Sarah said about what will happen as mayor and commission is, obviously we know how our recommendations don't always get listened to. So, yeah, that's kind of where I fall on this one.
I would like to make a motion to approve with staff condition 2.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Sarah Gehring, second by Sarah Beresford. I still have Mike in line to speak.
I just wanted to say that in regards to the staff recommendations, I can kind of understand why they made them in terms of wanting to bring like a non-conforming property and use this as an opportunity to kind of, like with the parking lot, reducing the lot coverage size with gravel lot, I think is an example of bringing kind of the non-conforming more into place. And I kind of see the sidewalk as the same thing. It's just a way to bring kind of some non-conforming features of this property, kind of up to standards for residential. So I'm in favor of both the conditions. I don't have a problem with those. And yeah, that was what I was going to say about the conditions. Oh, and one more thing. I thought it was interesting that, kind of going on, it's been used as a business. I think the applicant did put it in their application there. I thought it was interesting that it had been a business even before it was the doctor's office. It had been like a place where they made monuments, and it was like a RV camping place way back a long time ago. So I think its use as a business kind of predates even its use as a doctor's office in 1975.
So would it be appropriate for Mike to ask Sarah if she would accept a friendly amendment to the motion? Both, or are you open to that?
I mean, if Mike wanted to invite that it would be up to, we have a pending motion. So if Sarah wants to have just the condition 2, then that's the motion we have and we'll have a vote on. Okay, that is the motion we have and that's what Sarah wants to vote on. So we have a motion to approve with the second staff condition regarding the removal of the existing gravel parking and revegetation of that area in the rear to reduce the overall size of the parking area. But not the condition about the sidewalk in front. That would be left to the decision of the owner. We have a motion from Sarah Gehring, second from Sarah Beresford. Let's do a roll call.
Motion to approve with the condition. Morales,
Yes.
Please,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yes.
Gehring,
Yes.
Laughlin,
Yes.
Pass,
Yes.
Sams,
No.
Sanders,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And thank you to the members of the public who came out. We can go in 3 hours. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Oh my gosh, 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't care about this. Saying I know why they put it in.
Right, yeah.
Make or break for anybody.
Oh, no.
I recognize that our name and I'm not from that.
They are doing it the right way.
I got some. I don't want to.
I guess it's. You know.
So.
I'm gonna do it. I'm in the business right now. I took her class.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, we. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very loyal to Catholic stuff. So, on to say.
Yeah.
So they should have.
Right, it's like.
I think we get high.
Yeah, it was one of those, and this is one of those where I usually always. The kind of things, it's like they were worried about it,
I think.
about the fact that if it was a house.
I all the time, I'm like,
It sounds like either way, if it's a house for like 12 months, if somebody's living in it, then they've been with the special use. Oh, you know, I didn't go back. Sounds like everybody kind of gets what they wanted in the end anyway. Seems like down the road, it's like, oh, I'm having fun, and I walk in, I'm like, wait. It's like, wait, I didn't. There's some.
What's got, what's got, I don't know. Yeah.
Hey Maggie, how are you?
Starting out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a tough.
All right, so picking up where we left off, I just want to reiterate an announcement for the public that I made at the beginning of the meeting in case anybody came late and missed it. Under the new business section of our agenda, item 4, the one on Jefferson Road, was tabled by the applicant and so will not be heard tonight. So if anybody missed that at the start and came and wanted to see that, but we're not going to talk about that one tonight. So the remaining item before we get to the other business is simply item 3 under new business, 995 Gaines School Road. And staff report.
All right, good evening, everyone. At long last, we are here at case for 995 Gaines School Road. PD 2025-01-0060. The request, we don't see these requests very often. Typically, we're going in the other direction, but in this case, they're asking to dissolve a planned development. The property is currently zoned commercial office, land development in the Gaines School Road corridor overlay. They are asking to dissolve the planned development and return it to its base commercial office zoning in the Gaines School Road corridor overlay, for the purpose of demoing the existing office building and replacing it with what our code calls a medical center, the actual use would be an urgent care. It's approximately 3,700 square feet and 25 parking spaces, stormwater pond, very basic project. And just explain, this is all about dissolving the PD, going back to the base zoning to do the medical center, also urgent care. The lot, if you've been on the east side, you've almost certainly seen this. It's very prominent here at the corner of Cedar Shoals Drive and Gaines School Road. We have the Aldi Shopping Center to the bottom of the picture here across the street, the Ansonboro development here, and then we have Gaines Elementary School, Hillsman Elementary School just off screen to the top. We have some offices around this property and then residential. So if you've been over here, you know this is a significant corridor for the east side. And it's a very prominent lot in that corridor. Staff, as we went through the growth concept map, which is phase 1 of our ongoing 20-year future land use update, we noted that Gaines School Road could serve as a corridor with significant potential for growth and redevelopment and evolution over the next 20 years, and this lot would be a prominent opportunity to do so. It is currently designated for Main Street business. This would not change, staying the same. It is also, here's the zoning map. Just dissolving the PD. You can see the cross-hatched area is the Gaines School Road corridor overlay. It stops at this property at Cedar Shoals Drive. An image of the property. This is from its corner on Cedar Shoals Drive. As you're approaching the Gaines School Road intersection, you can see it's set rather far back from the road. The public right-of-way extends into this grassy area. There's some utilities under here, so there's some additional setback there. This is from the opposite corner on Gaines School Road. And then this is looking at it from the intersection, approximately 85 to 90 feet from where I'm standing to that front entry. So you can see it's just a lawn. There's a lot of land there that's perhaps underutilized and could potentially be redeveloped for more. Here's the applicant's proposal. It is non-binding, 3,700 square feet, single story, urgent care, parking, over here to the rear and the side. And then the stormwater pond is here in the front, and that'll come up later because we have a condition that's relevant to the stormwater pond. In non-binding elevations, we would note that these elevations would need some pretty noticeable revisions to comply with the overlay. The overlay mandates that any development along there mimic residential character, particularly more of the single family type of character. So porches, not flat roofs, but arched roofs. And so this plan would need some alterations to comply with that. There is a commercial project down the street. I believe it's where the La Paria is, that is an example of a project that complied with the overlay, even though it's commercial. The overlay was instituted in 2001 when we did the countywide rezone. And it was essentially there to preserve the character of that area as it existed in the 90s. So we would note that the plan is partially compatible with the 2023 comprehensive plan. It is a redevelopment opportunity on an infill location, bringing healthcare services to an area that's got a lot of other activity, whether it's education, residential, commercial. So it's good to complement that with the healthcare services. It is compatible. However, there are some opportunities, room for improvement. Comp plan calls for making appealing corridors and gateways. So it's important that as Gaines School is a corridor, that perhaps some additional attention be paid to architecture to make it more appealing. There's also, our code is going to require some additional sidewalk connectivity and bike parking on the site to improve access for walking and biking. It is compatible with our future land use map. It's compatible with our zoning map. However, when you look at that Main Street character description, you probably only say it's partially compatible. The Main Street business expects storefront types of commercial uses with potential for mixed use multi-story buildings where you have commercial on the ground floor and residential above, but again, at that very Main Street type of character. So when you put a stormwater pond between your entrance and or between your building and the street, and when you don't have an entry off of Cedar, one of your major streets there, that's not really following the character of the Main Street business designation. Like I said, the plans would need some adjustment to comply with the overlay. The lack of shade along here, if you go back to the area, you can see that there's no tree cover as you approach this intersection along this property. If we're going to encourage people to walk, and there are already plenty of people who do walk through that area, having some shade, especially on a hot day, would make that a much more pleasant experience. So we've added a condition that they will already be required to plant street trees, but typically you don't plant trees in the stormwater pond because that could potentially interfere with the function of the pond. In this case, we've got a condition on the next slide that would allow compatible tree species to be planted in that stormwater pond to give some street tree coverage. Overall, the project, it's a 3,700 square foot building on a 28,000 square foot lot. It's a single story, single use building. So it's a relatively low development yield in an area that projects as an enhanced business district or an activated corridor. We do support dissolving the PD because we don't, looking back at this PD from the 80s, it's not delivering in staff's estimation a whole lot of community benefit. And this would allow it to go back to by right zoning. But we would note that it's maybe not yielding as much potential as it could. We are recommending a addition and then additions on the next slide here. So with that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, Stephen. At this time,
Hello, my name is Will Avett with Foresight Group, 184 Peachtree Hollow Court, Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm the civil engineer who helped prepare the civil plans that was included. Yeah, first off, I wanted to give thanks to Stephen and the Athens staff. They've been very helpful with the process and helping us go through what the best route and strategy for preparing this application. And as Stephen alluded to, we're just trying to dissolve the PD that's currently associated with the site plan, which pretty much prevents any type of redevelopment associated with the property right now, because you're obligated to the site plan that was originally put in place back in, I think, the late 1970s. So we're just trying to dissolve that and then just bring it back to the base zoning. And then as Stephen mentioned, it has a Gain School Road overlay district. So any type of redevelopment that we would do there would accommodate the sections of code that it requires, which he mentioned, bringing the building closer to the roadway, which, as you saw from the aerial and the street view, that there's a lot of unused area there that has potential to make that that hot spot, if you will, at that corner intersection more of the look of the Gain School overlay. And he mentioned that the La Paria, that little area where the building's right up on the roadway, and it, just looks very nice. And then also, as the condition, bringing extra landscaping there to make it look nicer and provide shade opportunities. So, and we've already reached out to the arborist and Stephen, just kind of going through all of the recommendations and the conditions, and we're all accepting of their conditions of approval for it. And we're happy to make those shown and implemented in the site plan. So that's about it. And just wanted to say, would like to hope it gets approved, and we're willing to work with the staff and commission on any other type of conditions that are available. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avon.
And I'm on the development team for the applicant, Luke Strickland, 915 Pine Street, Tallahassee, Florida. Just to reiterate what Will said, we support staff support of us with the condition. We've met with the arborist, and yeah, we're ready, willing, and excited to work with all the requests. So just kind of here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Well, yeah. Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in support of this application? Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in opposition? All right, we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission. Who wants to start us off? Sarah?
Just a quick question, Stephen, did you say these are binding site plans or they are not?
Non-binding.
Okay, and so I was wondering about the sidewalk situation. I see sidewalks drawn in, but is it actually the case that sidewalks would not be, or does the overlay require sidewalks on Gain School?
If you look at the corrective actions part of your staff report, there's one that talks about how they would to extend a sidewalk connection to the Cedar Shoals
Okay,
Drive side parcel, which they did not show in there.
and so,
Corrective actions.
oh, okay. And so would those corrective actions need to be something we identify as conditions, or would the technical review make that happen anyway?
It's code, and it being a binding plan, it would have to code review.
Okay, and we wouldn't have to call those out as conditions, they're just in order, like if we agree with that, those, like the corrective actions make sense, but we don't have to justify that in our recommendation. Okay. Okay.
Stephen, can you just clarify how the Gain School overlay operates here? You said as shown on the drawings, it can't be built in that way because of it's incompatible with certain features of the overlay. How do overlays operate, in this process? Like if we're being asked just to remove the existing PD and if let's say that this body recommended, the Mayor and Commission approved a binding site plan that didn't comply with the in-school overlay, is that something that the mayor and commission could decide to do? Because then they're passing an ordinance, wouldn't that supersede the overlay, or does the overlay have some status where it can't be superseded by an approval of a PD or a binding site plan or something?
And I know you're asking Stephen, but then over to me. So
Stephen was looking at you, so I.
Of Stephen's answer, but the overlay is like the underlying zones regulations. They apply to that property. The only way to get relief from those would be to seek some sort of waiver request. Now, with special uses, it's different. With a straight rezone, that's not in play. This one's a little odd. We don't often see the dissolution of a PD, right? And this was one of the things we talked about with this being sort of unique. Is there still some utility to the PD where that PD could be used as a way to get relief from certain things? And maybe it's not a dissolution, but it's a modification. But ultimately, the applicant decided, kind of took that track of, let's involve it and work with the underlying zoning and the regulations that come with the corridor as well.
In the base zoning, and then you have the overlay. The base zoning applies everywhere that the overlay doesn't speak to. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think so. And so the mayor and commission could override the overlay in the way that we override zoning all the time, like with the PD or with the binding site plan that deviates through waivers or something like that. But
yeah, but it would be irregular for them with this application for them to introduce a condition of approval that says you're off the hook for this development regulation or that development regulation.
Okay, thank you. Kristen.
I don't see a problem with this. I think it activates a corner that otherwise goes completely unnoticed. So, I would like to recommend approval.
Is that a
With the
motion?
staff condition. Yes, I'd like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion to approve with staff condition.
Thank you. Second. Motion by Kristen, second by Alex. Any discussion of the motion?
But just to be clear, not to belabor the sidewalk thing, but this would have to have sidewalks on both sides of the property. Cedar Shoals and Gaines School. Is that right?
It already has sidewalks in the public right of way. It would have to have sidewalk connections to those on both frontages.
And what does that mean? You mean like just connecting the building and out to that sidewalk? Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yes.
All right, any further discussion of the motion? All right, let's have a roll call.
Motion to approve condition. Morales,
Yeah.
Reese,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yeah.
Gehring,
Yes.
Laughlin,
Yes.
Pass. Yes. Sam's,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Lord.
Yes.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. And that brings us to the other business section of our agenda. Item 1 is the planning commission. Here has the report. That brings us to you, Alex. Steering committee chairs.
Just a quick report. Or update more or less, and I don't even think it's kind of fair. We are meeting on Monday. We've had a little bit of time off over the holidays and because we are now, we're going from a lot of talk and a lot of getting our verbiage down, our written word of what this will all be, which section will be. And now we're gonna kind of, instead, we're pulling out the map and we're putting all of our uses in the right places. That starts on Monday. And that meeting is from 2 to 4. It's actually written as 2 to 4:30. I saw something, so I don't know if that was a mistake or y'all were just understanding they always go to 4:30.
So now we'll go to 5.
Yeah, now to go to 5. So y'all are always welcome. Got a minute and hang around. You can kind of see what the process is. So when it does come before the planning commission, you'll have a little bit of an idea. But so more of the fun begins, and I think we're making very good headway with what we're doing. And anything else that you or staff needs to say?
We're at the exciting bits. I mean, that's the truth. The steering committee has done a lot of hard work on the research side and the understanding of the community, really, like top to bottom, underground, above ground. So now it's at that creative moment with all that knowledge. How do you apply it and think about a 20-year window for growth? And Monday's discussion is guaranteed to be lively, and that's good. So staff's excited. We're very thankful for the steering committee's work. Coming out of the steering committee, we're very excited to get back into the community and taking what this product is out for comment. So there will be another engagement round there. And all of this is dovetailing with Urban 3 coming to town in March. So it seems like it's coming together. But yeah, Monday's a big day.
What time?
2 to 4.
Where are those meetings? In here?
Yeah, here.
Monday.
It's on my calendar.
What's the timeline for, that you all anticipate for finished product coming to us for a vote and then going to the mayor commission?
So anticipating perhaps 2 meetings with steering committee, but that's an estimation. We'll see how far we get on Monday and what we have left to do. We would then go through probably a 30-day cycle of meetings in the community. Within that time frame, there would also be a work session that's been requested with the mayor and commission specifically about future land use. We had a really good moment with them at a mini retreat a couple of weeks back. I think there was a bit of a mention of it in the flagpole about sort of the substance of it. We don't get too many of those, so that was important. And I think coming out of that, we anticipate that discussion with the mayor and commission then coming to you. And if there's anything that comes out of public comment that we feel like the steering committee needs to sit down and wrestle with and factor into a proposed future land use map, we will have a moment of taking it back to the steering committee. It's a promise we made to them. I think it's also procedurally a pretty good step, but we'll see. We'll see how that comes together. So coming to you, we have to be mindful of the summertime. So if we could have it to the planning commission, May, perhaps June at the latest, and then a recommendation moving forward to the mayor and commission. They have the mayor has the liberty to, it's not like a zoning item where it has to follow the next immediate month. So if we get into the summer months, we fully anticipate having to make it until August or September before politically it's comfortable, the group's comfortable making a decision without everybody back in town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on that? No. All right, then item 3 is the planning director's report.
So I don't have much to report, but I do want to say all the items that you sent up from your January meeting were all adopted Tuesday night. They were not unanimous, so I would encourage you to take a look at the meeting if you're curious about that, but all of them were supported ultimately. The text amendment passed unanimously. So there's the report on that. As far as the forecast for next month,
There's 3 plus a text amendment.
and that's potentially including Jefferson Road?
No.
Okay, so
They would come in.
next cycle after. Okay, so that's an important clarification. So you wouldn't see Jefferson Road next month, but the month after, assuming everything gets worked out.
Okay. And the coverage I saw on flagpole and on Twitter and elsewhere, that the North Avenue project that we saw where the people live in the RVs right now was approved, but that there was talk of possible text amendments or study of permitting RVs or maybe revisiting ADUs. Can you
Sure.
share any status on that?
as part of the commission's consideration of the 218 North Avenue item, there was a request to ask staff through the manager to study RVs as a form of housing and how that could be accommodated in the code. In the discussion, the mayor also made it clear that, yes, if that passed, and it did, that would be taken up, but it would be done in tandem with the discussion about other forms of housing like ADUs. And so where we stand with that is there will be a work session in March where staff will have an opportunity to present a first reaction to that research about the RVs and raise some questions to make sure that we're on the right track. Coming out of that, we would anticipate some form of text amendment on a timeline, probably 2 to 3 months after that, depending on what they ask us to do.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions on that subject?
We have a miscellaneous.
I don't see that.
Stephen, did you do that entire report on your little blue? Note?
Just a few notes.
It's nothing but writing on there. I just noticed it. The whole damn thing on something that big.
I scribble hard.
I just thought that should be brought up.
He signs rice grains and puts them in little pendants.
Imagine what your house looks like. Anyway, that was all.
All right, any other miscellaneous announcements from anyone? All right. Good meeting, everyone. Adjourn. All right, we need a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Hey, make a motion. Oh, I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion at 9 seconds.
Brad?
Yeah.
What's he doing? I still have a. That's not that. But I see him once
Very
a
vivid
year
memory.
at the holiday parade. We both end up at
21 years
Turf
old.
Bar.
Oh.
Randomly.
And,
I never go there,
and-
but I see him
and
every year. And so I just see him and I'm like, what
And
are
I
you doing?
wake
He's
up
like, and 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh my God.
An hour before I had to get up for work.
Didn't it turn the gun?
Yes, yeah, no, it was actually, and I still to this